Ladies and gentlemen, please find your seats. We'll begin shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for His Royal Highness Crown Prince Haakon of Norway.
Shipping is the lifeblood of global trade. For 60 years, North Shipping has been at its beating heart. From the dawn of containerization to digital revolutions, the ocean industries have transformed alongside the world they serve. Since 1965, North Shipping has brought the world together, a hub for innovation, conversation, and collaboration. Today's challenges demand not just progress, but purpose. Leadership means navigating change with courage and clarity, but we face stormier waters. War in Europe, polarized politics, fragile supply chains. The rules of global engagement are shifting, and the need for strong, steady leadership has never been greater. As we mark 60 years of North Shipping, we open this week with a clear-eyed look at where the world stands and what lies ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to North Shipping 2025. It's an honor to have her with us today. Let's hear it for your wonderful host, Lydia Capolicchio.
Thank you. Thank you. Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, distinguished guests, and valued members of the maritime community, welcome to Ocean Leadership Conference at North Shipping 2025. And a special welcome as we celebrate 60 years of this global gathering. We meet in a time of rapid change, but within that change, opportunity lies. Today is about leadership that balances ambition with responsibility. You will hear from bold thinkers, proven leaders, and rising voices. And remember that this conference is a two-way conversation. You will have the possibility to send questions to our panel discussions, and we will show you how you will do that later. Because remember, we are all responsible of the outcome today. More about that later. Our first speaker is someone who plays a vital role in shaping the future of maritime safety, sustainability, and innovation in Norway and beyond. Please welcome the Director General of Shipping and Navigation at the Norwegian Maritime Authority, Mr. Alf Tore Sørheim.
Highness, Ministers, Ambassadors, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you to this important opening conference, both as head of the Norwegian Maritime Authority and on behalf of Norway as a proud host nation. For decades, the Norwegian Maritime Authority has worked to strengthen Norway's position as a safe, responsible, and future-facing shipping nation. Shipping brings ambition to light and helps turn everyday efforts into meaningful collaboration, and that collaboration into real change. This year's theme, Future-Proof, is about making the maritime sector robust, relevant, and sustainable. Sustainable in the face of the challenges and opportunities ahead. It's an ambitious aim, but also a fitting one, as Shipping marks its 60th anniversary as one of the most important maritime arenas on the global stage. It's time we stop thinking about the future as something far off. The future is being shaped here and now, through the decisions that we take here and now, even when the waters are rough. The climate challenges make it absolutely necessary that we steer global shipping onto a more sustainable course. We know that global shipping accounts for a significant share of emissions, but we also know that when organized and managed properly, shipping remains the most environmentally friendly mode of transport. And that's precisely why the maritime industry has a key role to play in the green transition. Climate change is only part of the picture. We're also dealing with a more turbulent world. With rising geopolitical tension, supply chains under strain, and growing pressure on the oceans as a key part of global infrastructure. These challenges call for fresh thinking and long-term resolve. And at the heart of it all stands the shipping industry, a key player in global logistics, providing reliable, secure, and efficient transport even under the most testing conditions. The industry is not only central to the green transition, but also plays a vital role in safeguarding supply security. We have every reason to be proud of the role played by the Norwegian flag. The Norwegian Ship Register is one of the most modern in the world, and our flag is rightly regarded a quality flag. And that's a responsibility that we take seriously. The role of the Norwegian Maritime Authority is not simply to regulate, but also to support. We aim to be a genuine partner to shipping companies, technology hubs, crews, and public authorities. We stand behind those who lead the way, and we're committed to ensure that regulation supports rather than hinders innovation. And that's one of the many reasons why Shipping remains such an important platform for us and for everyone gathered here today. Shipping has always shown a remarkable capacity to adapt. That resilience is why the industry remains as vital today as it was a century ago. And once again, we must rise to the occasion. We're not faced with a choice between the economy and the environment. We must develop solutions that serve both. To do so, we need greater collaboration. We need platforms where we can test, innovate, and act together. Because if recent years have taught us anything, it's this. The major challenges are not solved in silos. They are solved through collaboration. Shipping 2025 offers a chance to demonstrate what can be achieved when the industry, the authorities, and the political leaders pull in the same direction. That's why I look to the future with real optimism. Yes, the challenges, they are considerable. But we have the knowledge, we have the determination, and we have the ability to work together. And these are our greatest assets. And that gives me confidence that we will succeed in our mission. Thank you very much for your attention, and once again, welcome to this conference.
Thank you. Joining us now on screen is a global leader in maritime governance. As Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization, he oversees international efforts to ensure safe, secure, and environmentally sound shipping. Please give a warm virtual welcome to Mr. Arsenio Dominguez.
This year, the International Maritime Organization is set to adopt the mandatory IMO Net Zero framework. This will demonstrate that IMO delivers on the commitments set out in the 2023 IMO strategy on the reduction of GHG emissions from ships. Shipping will become the first global industry with an annual greenhouse gas fuel intensity standard and a price on greenhouse gas emissions. Success is built on engagement, dialogue, and shared action. IMO drives innovation and progress through regulation, but the real engine of the change is you, the global shipping community. That is why events like No Shipping 2025 are so important. This is where challenges find solutions, ideas spark partnerships, and progress accelerates as first movers show the way. During the week, engage with each other, listen to one another, and be the leaders our sector needs.
Thank you. Our next speaker leads one of Norway's most influential maritime organizations, representing an industry that is both a global player and a driving force in the green transition. Please welcome the CEO of the Norwegian Ship Owners Association, Mr. Knut Arild Hareide.
Your Royal Highness, Ministers, Ambassadors, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Shipping is a silent force behind globalization. Without ships, global trade would simply stop. For decades, this industry has connected people and markets. It has moved goods, lifted economies, lifted people out of poverty, and shaped our modern world. Our industry has been vital for food security and for energy security. Shipping reminds us that we are not isolated islands. We are part of something much bigger, a global community. We have believed in free trade. We have believed that countries do better when they work together. We have believed in collaboration. But these ideas are now under pressure. Geopolitical tensions are rising. Protectionism is growing. Conflicts threaten freedom of navigation. Our industry has always had to handle risk, but now we are increasingly part of the geopolitical game. In this moment of challenge, we also see opportunities for leadership. That brings me to climate change. In January this year, global emissions fell for the first time ever outside of a pandemic. It shows that change is possible, but we are still far from reaching our climate goals. We need to move faster, and with greater determination, our direction must be clear. In April, the IMO took a truly historic decision. For the first time, countries agreed both on a fuel standard and on an economic mechanism. There was a broad support for a system that would cover 85% of the sector's emissions. This is a big step forward. It sets a clear direction, net zero by 2050. We are proud that Norway played a key role. Sveining Oftedal, who led the negotiations on behalf of the IMO, did a brilliant job. In October, at the next MEPC meeting, this policy must be finalized. To make that happen, we need 2/3 support. That means real decisions, that means courage, and that means leadership. This is more than just regulations. It's about trust, it's about credibility, it's about showing that shipping can lead a global transformation together. The message from Norwegian ship owners is clear. Norway is committed. But a global industry needs a global framework, global standards, and a global leadership. I was a young boy on the island of Bømlo at the 1970s. That was when two brothers, Lauritz and Christian Eidesvik, started out with a single fishing boat. Their company grew from fishing to offshore into two large separate shipping companies. I asked Christian, what is the secret to your success in Bømlo? He smiled and said, because people like you that study business economy at NHH haven't arrived in Bømlo yet. The brothers believed in more than just businesses. They believed in people. They built companies and communities. They built sport arenas. They saved jobs where others had given up. They believed in giving people an opportunity. Many of you here today do exactly the same. You build value, not just for yourself, but for your communities. We are a global power in shipping. And behind every number, there is a person, a family, a community. Let us never forget that, because our strength is people. And together, we can build sustainable future for shipping and for our societies. Thank you.
Well, we now turn to our first main theme, state of play. The maritime industry is navigating a rapidly evolving risk landscape. Yet shipping continues to play a vital role, not just in global commerce, but in stability and resilience. To help us make sense of today's complex geopolitical environment and what it means for shipping, we're joined by someone with deep experience at the intersection of policy, climate, and international business. Please welcome the former UK Minister for Energy and Clean Growth, Ms. Claire O'Neill.
Well, good morning, Your Royal Highness, Secretary Kerry, honourable visitors, ladies and gentlemen. It is, as always, a great pleasure to join one of these wonderful events in Norway, particularly in June and not December. And there are three things I have learned from my many visits to speak with you in Norway. Always visit the harbour, wherever you are staying. Never try the pickled herring at breakfast, even if you're feeling adventurous. And this is a great opportunity to have conversations about British football, because while many of you support, obviously, the big teams, thanks to that one programme in the 1970s, many of you also support, like I do, second-tier, not very well-performing English football teams like Leicester City. Any other supporters here today? I'm sure there are. And it's especially relevant and interesting to join you today. I am a former UK politician. I was responsible for our rail network, which of course intersected with our ports, and then for our energy and clean growth work. And I now sit in a multiple of private sector roles on the board of Oxy Petroleum in the US, the Singapore Stock Exchange, on the recently privatized Wynwood AI, and a whole host of other clean technology companies. And I, like you, am trying to make sense of the upending of what we thought were the global norms, the trend towards globalization, which I have taken for granted for most of my working life. Now, I am in a room of shipping experts, not an industry I would pretend to know very well, but I do know energy. And I think the parallels are quite similar. We're having to navigate extraordinary challenges and make long-term investment decisions for assets that will have working lives of 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And in both industries, the value we create and the complexity of what we do, I think, is almost never recognized. You know, we love to see pictures when things go wrong of tankers the wrong way around in the Suez Canal or colliding boats in the North Sea. But few realize the vast reach and power of the maritime industry, worth trillions of dollars in global trade, responsible, as we know, for 80% of everything that is moved around, and of course with 97% of our global data flows going through those increasingly vital subsurface connections. Now, some countries, I think, like Norway, Singapore, Greece, and China, do recognize the value of shipping, both for its local economic value, but also of the power that it has in the global trade. And they actively prioritize it. I know it is a matter of debate currently as to how much the Norwegian government is doing and what more they could do. But others do not really look beyond their coastlines. You know, despite the UK still being a global hub for shipping services, ship brokers, ship insurance, it has been really sad to see successive UK governments oversee the unravelling of Britain's once mighty maritime trade position. We have had, since the Second World War, no attempts to create a joined-up strategy for shipping in the UK until 2019, and the execution of that is going quite slowly, given the other priorities for government. It could be worse. I spend a lot of time on the southwest coast of Ireland, where ShipApp is a great way to see what is passing on the trade routes. And of course, there is quite a lot of hostile vessel activity, given that that is where so many of our vital data cables come ashore for Europe. Last time we had a scare, the call went out to the Irish Navy to send a ship. Well, the problem is there were only 2 ships available. One was in dry dock and the second was attending the Gay Pride celebrations in Dublin. I hope President Trump didn't hear about that. But it just goes to show what can happen if you have a massively important coastline and seascape and don't think hard about its strategic priority. But the truth is that too few of us look out to sea in real life and realize that to keep the marine economy operating at maximum efficiency, you need smooth and predictable trends, things that are nothing that we have today. And the key challenge is working out what is a temporary blip, a squall, if you like, versus what is a sustained change, a real sustained wind shift, as well as deal with some of the industry-specific challenges which we will talk about, decarbonisation and regulation. So I'm going to take you on 3 quick deep dives. Trump, tariff and turmoil. How do we look through this to the future beyond? And what is hot for the shipping industry? So I asked AI to help me with an image today, a carrier beating towards a storm. And then I realized when I looked at it, this has no flag. It has no name. It's probably a dark fleet vessel, giving its condition. So well, it's appropriate given we need to talk about dark fleets, but perhaps it could have been better. But anyway, bear with me. So Mr. Trump, the new presidency, 62 days since Liberation Day, and I feel I have whiplash from trying to keep up with what is happening with this blitzkrieg approach to policy making in the White House. You'll have heard that Mr. Trump is now the taco president. Trump always chickens out, particularly when the bond market collapses. And the challenge, therefore, is trying to see what is part of a long-term industrial strategy versus what is the art of a deal negotiation. Some of it depends on who the president is listening to, whether he's listening to the Uber hawks, Mr. Navarro and others, or whether he's listening to Mr. Besant and the other slightly more pragmatic party. But what is clear is that tariffs are no longer being used as a weapon of economic warfare to try and force us back to a steady state. They are being used actively as part of a revenue raiser for fiscal reasons and also as part of an industrial reshoring exercise. And there is no question that these are having a knock-on effect in today's industry. I mean, you've only to look at the issues around forward purchasing, cargoes being on and offloaded, ports standing idle or being overloaded, and to look actually at what happened to Trump Tariff 1.0 with China when container trade basically flatlined between China and the US from 2018 onwards. And of course, it's not just tariffs. Looking at the fees being charged for Chinese-built vessels calling at US ports may indeed drive a new wave of shipbuilding I don't think in America. I think that industrial strategy will fail, but certainly in other Southeast Asian states, particularly South Korea, as a result. And I think we need to accept that these tariffs and the other nation-first policies in the US are here to stay. This is a very clumsy way of doing it, picking fights with Canada and Mexico, insulting Europe for fighting random wars nobody's heard of. This is not diplomacy as we know it. But this process of creating a nation-first industrial strategy mirrors what, frankly, has been happening in other countries, China, Saudi Arabia, Russia, India, for many years. And it is, I think, a new nation-first global order. The US must have an election in 2028. It will elect another leader, but as we saw with President Biden, who was hawkish on China, who continued the tariff regime, there is something different now about democracy. And I think what we're seeing in all Western democracies, including the UK, is that, the waves of political interest are growing steeper and more frequent. And it is much easier to sell to voters the benefits of onshoring jobs than the benefits of cheap iPhones made overseas. It was interesting to see the elections in Australia and Canada, which benefited very much from an anti-Trump effect, but essentially incumbency is out of fashion. And countries that have political parties that can make simplistic political arguments, we will see those parties on the rise. And so I think it's fair to say that tariffs are here, alliances for trade are here, and free trade is out of fashion for a long time. And of course, we have these military flashpoints everywhere. President Trump would like a Nobel Peace Prize. So far, his track record of trying to solve global conflicts is not going to deliver that. And what we're also seeing is the retreat of the US, basically saying we are no longer the world's policeman, and the question being who picks up the slack. I talked a bit about our maybe that should be called, merchant vessel sanction buster or something. But it is the case that the operation of the dark and the grey fleet are starting to attract political attention for the first time. They're now being seen as part of the way of solving sanctions. Panama's recent delisting of many vessels was a case in point. Now, your industry is really good at dealing with changes in many ways. So many companies benefited from the closure of the Red Sea. Freight rates jumped. But this is something where you almost need a lot more predictability to make the long-term investment. And if we look through the current conflict and we look at long-term growth plans, shipping obviously does well when there is long-term sustained economic growth. It is the case that if you go back 15 years, where we've had a financial crisis that almost crippled the post-war banking order. We've had Brexit, we've had COVID, we've had military flashpoints around the world. Your industry has steadily grown year on year, not always as steadily as you would like, but it continues to grow. So do the tariffs mean we are facing a global recession? Well, I'm not an economist either, but I put this question to the former Bank of England chief economist, Andy Haldane, last week. His industry, by the way, is great at forecasting recessions. He said they have forecast 22 of the last 3 recessions. Think about that. And what he said was, there is not a recession in sight. We, of course, will see changes in growth rates, but actually rising healthcare, rising productivity, expanding populations in places like India and Africa. All of this is driving up long-term global economic growth. And of course, governments, particularly those that don't have huge budget deficits, are investing massively, as is the private sector, in the energy transition, in AI and digital transformation. I think sometimes it's easy to forget in lower growth Europe that India is forecast to grow at 8% this year. So barring black swan events, which none of us can predict, we will see rising, steady economic growth. But there will be three main effects. We will see new regional alliances emerge, and it is fascinating to see what is happening in Asia. In 1990, intra-Asian trade was 46% of the total. 2 years ago, it was 58%. It's forecast to be 70% by 2030. Supply chains are really difficult to untangle. You know, governments are not going to all start making steel and ships and widgets, even if they would like to. And so increasingly, companies will look for new markets for their products rather than seeking to radically change their production line. And there is a security-first obsession emerging now in every aspect of trade, particularly in energy. Because we are obsessed with security is part of the reasons emissions keep rising. You know, the IEA tells us that the contribution of fossil fuels to primary energy consumption last year was 80%. When we started the COP process 30 years ago, it was 83%. The world is still using an awful lot of coal, highest level ever by seaborne trade last year, of oil, although that outlook is less predictable, and of gas. And in fact, the outlook for gas, for LNG, particularly given what is happening in Europe, turning off the Russian gas supplies, and the inclusion of LNG in Trump's trade deals, means that the outlook for gas carriage is actually quite healthy. I also want to mention climate turmoil. You know, if this had been a speech 2 years ago, it would have been all about climate, but it is going to be so interesting. You know, you can't cheat atmospheric physics, even if you can forget about it for a while. We will see a de-icing Arctic. That will have huge implications for this industry. There is a reason, of course, why Trump wants to buy Greenland. So let's just focus briefly on what's hot for the industry. Data. My board service with Winwood and through SGX, which of course owns the Baltic Exchange, was eye-opening to really understand the power of data for compliance, for risk mitigation, for optimization of routes, for understanding of value trapped in cargoes, and for providing increasingly decision support tools for your industries. That will be a hugely helpful area as you navigate uncertainty, and also a hugely investable area. It was no secret that Winwood was taken private by a New York-based private equity company. Secondly, decarbonisation. I served as the first COP president designate for COP26 until I was fired by Boris Johnson. I think of that as a badge of honour, actually. But I was able to execute a very effective action plan before that role, including asking global industries to look really hard at themselves and see what it would take to be a net zero industry by 2050. And very few responded. The shipping industry, led largely out of Europe, was one of the few industries that really delivered. And even in this world of climate realism, where we're seeing the effects of climate change, but also we are seeing retreat from some of our climate ambition, it is amazing actually to see the IMO deal really bucking the trend, and I think delivering a fairly thoughtful package that the industry clearly has been consulted on and can work with. But a caution. The outline may be clear, but the endorsement and adoption are by no means clear. CORSIA, we think of as another UN-driven industry scheme, by no means clear that that is going to be adopted. I don't have time to talk about Fuel EU. You know, it's interesting how sometimes the bureaucratic technicalities are put in there, I think to disguise the fact it's actually a tax, if I'm truthful. But again, I do think there is sufficient flexibility and technology agnosticism in that deal to mean that it is workable. And the question really is now, who benefits? How do you make money from doing this? And to whom can you charge a green premium? So let me start to draw to a finish and sum up. We are in a much messier world. It is unpredictable, it is politically charged, and I think part of the challenge is where I started. I don't think the maritime industry has sufficient visibility in the debate. Partly that's because countries don't look out to sea. I think it may be partly to do with this industry's historic desire to get on with it and leave governments alone. But political decisions not only have a knock-on impact for your industry, they have a major impact on the world's ability to power itself, to feed itself, and to grow. So all participants need to be loud and clear in advocating for what is needed. Your objectives may not always be aligned, but your trade-offs and your views must be heard. And I think this is almost a third hot trend. We heard about data and decarb. I think dialogue is something that is absolutely crucial. You know, if you look at my lovely ship, you can probably see that I think clear skies and smoother waters are ahead if you can weather the squalls. Transparency, discussion, joint advocacy, clear communications will help with this near-term navigation to get to those smoother returns ahead. And that is why events like this, North Shipping, its 60th event, is so important. A great honor to be with you. And so may I encourage you to have open and honest dialogue, great debates, some great parties, and fair winds and following seas for this week and the years to come. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Claire, who will be back very soon, actually. And thank you for underlining the essence of dialogue and the necessity. Because we now move into a panel discussion that will further explore the big picture forces shaping global trade and the maritime economy. And we would like to remind you that you can contribute to the conversation by submit your questions via Slido. And you do it by scanning the QR code that you see on screen with your phone. Scan it and join and send in your question at any time. We will pick the best one out. To help us unpack these complex questions, we're joined by a truly distinguished panel. So I welcome back former UK Minister for Energy and Clean Growth, Ms. Claire O'Neill. President of Cargill Ocean Transportation, Mr. Jan Dieleman. And that is not quite right, actually, because we are welcoming Editor-in-Chief of Tradewinds, Mr. Julian Bray.
Thank you, Lydia, and good morning, Claire, and good morning, Your Royal Highness, Secretary of State Kerry, and distinguished guests. Claire, there's a lot to talk about in these issues because it is a very disrupted, complex, and uncertain world. But there's one thing I need to pick up with you before we start. I heard you mention Leicester City. Now, I must admit, I'm a Coventry City fan, your local rivals. So I'm not sure how this is...
Never been top of the Premier League.
No, they haven't. So I'm not sure how this is going to go. I mentioned disruption, complexity, and uncertainty. Disruption, shipping can handle. After all, it's what shipping gets paid for in many ways. Complexity, it lifts the barriers to entry, and it is a business challenge to meet those expectations. But uncertainty really kills business. Investments are delayed, deals are put off. How do you manage uncertainty in these times?
Well, I think it's particularly crucial for shipping now because, of course, all the decisions about new vessel build, new engine choices, new port facilities, this kind of opening up of the world, if you like, to the value of shipping, those decisions need to be made now. It's a bit like the energy transition. And what will happen is those decisions get delayed. And potentially the cost of those investments goes up. But I do think this period will calm down. We will see trade deals. You know, we need to accept, I think, that the world is moving into these regional friend groups. But I think we will see trade deals. There will be clearer certainty, particularly around tariff levels over the next hopefully 6 months.
This appears to be the crux of the issue that's facing many people in this room at the moment. The short term seems so disrupted and uncertain, but the long term would appear to be all other things being accepted, to have a lot of fundamental positive elements still in its favour.
I agree with that. Again, I think we talk ourselves into a low-growth world, but and of course things will be different. But, it is the case that productivity in the US continues to outstrip almost every other developed nation. China slows down, but it slows down to a 4% growth rate, something the UK would long for. If you look at the economics and the fundamental drivers of the world, there is long-term growth, and long-term growth is what drives historically the growth in shipping, growth in volumes, growth in profitability.
You mentioned visibility of the industry. Shipping in the last 5 years or so, since the COVID crisis and the supply chain disruption, has rapidly moved back up the strategic agenda to a place it probably hasn't been for the last 50 or 70 years, in fact. What are the implications of that, do you believe?
Well, I think, first of all, shipping is almost invisible, as we talked about. The average person looking at whatever they have on their plate in front of them or whatever they're buying, whatever energy system they're using, never really understands the role of shipping. And in fact, the cost-effective, low-emission role of shipping in delivering that. So I think there's still work to be done. And I think many governments, including the UK, they came out with a strategy in 2019, are starting to talk a good game. But ultimately, when the world goes into uncertain times, politicians lose their focus too. And if the industry needs long-term investments, long-term tax regimes, long-term support for different fuel requirements, then it needs to keep advocating. There's a great book called Down to the Sea in Ships by a chap called Horatio Clare, who became a writer in residence on some shipping lines. And he said, when you're out to sea, land is just this featureless little flat thing with a few lighthouses. It's very easy to ignore what is happening on land, but the shipping industry really needs to engage.
I must raise the question of globalization. And ultimately, the question is, does there need to be a more serious, mature conversation about globalization in Western democracies? Because after all, it is the maleffects of globalization which has driven the rise of populist politics. That globalization, once lifted billions out of absolute poverty, the divisions within many Western countries have grown wider. 800 billionaires in the US today, wider than ever income disparity. The populist politicians appear not to have the answers that are credible at the moment. Witness Trump's tariff. But the center, the established political elite, doesn't really have proper answers as well that really have cogent answers to those problems. Where's that
I
going?
think globalization for many countries has always been transactional.
Yeah.
Without mentioning names, but some countries have dealt within global trade with global trade conditions, but basically had a whole series of indirect tariffs. They have got themselves elected to positions of influence in the IMO, in the COP system, elsewhere in the Global Health Organization. They have made globalization work for them. And as you say, the implications for that, the elephant curve, as they call it, shows that millions of people have lost out. Cost of living, the incomes in the UK in real terms have still not returned to their pre-COVID level. I mean, this is just, a very, very long-term decline. And that means people are unhappy. And as I mentioned, it's much easier to sell the benefits of a job down the road than free trade. And I kind of think that's here to stay. Yeah. So in a way, politicians are going to have to be a lot smarter for advocating, particularly for trade deals and regional trade deals that may have short-term consequences for their country, but benefit.
But you would certainly agree there's a big difference
Absolutely.
between doing that and outright protectionism,
Absolutely.
which is a lot of what we're seeing at the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah. You are credited with being one of the architects of the UK's energy transition shift, which is put us almost in a world-leading position. But frankly, those policies are now under threat because of some of this disruption. Where do you believe countries like the UK and other Western European countries can take the energy transition from here?
What was interesting, by the way, just to say for a minute, so the advent of offshore wind in the North Sea was really good for shipbuilders on the East Coast. It had a transformational effect on many of those maritime communities that had been left behind. I think we're in an age of climate realism, which is actually something I have trademarked as a term, because we cannot cheat atmospheric physics, and the impact of warming and disruption is here to stay for every country. But equally, we never thought enough about the cost of the transition, about some of the trade-offs that we had to make, and I think we relied too much on ideology and not pragmatism. Norway is an incredibly pragmatic country, particularly when you look at your energy system. You are, have done very well from oil and gas production. You've made your operations as low methane and low carbon as you can, but you continue to advocate for the role of fossil fuels in the energy mix, and evidence and data would suggest that is still the case. So I think we just need to be very pragmatic going forward.
And just a final quick one before we close. You're a former energy minister. You've had to negotiate with senior politicians around the world. What would, if you were in the Oval Office, confronted with Trump and his cabinet, what would you go through? Would you go for flattery or confrontation?
Secretary Kerry may have a view on this.
Would it be the Keir Starmer approach or the Mark Carney approach?
Well, I think so. First of all, I'd probably put on high heels and a lot of lipstick, because that appears to be the look for most women in the Oval Office. Secondly, there was a piece of work done. There was a test done to see, could you flatter politicians too much? When did they get to know that they were really being played? There is no limit. You can lay it on with a trowel 24/7, and they will. It might be the same for crown princes, I don't know. But you can lay it on, and they continue to lap it up. And I think certainly with personality types now, flattery, but also appealing to America first. The reason that the tax credit for carbon removal, 45Q, looks to survive is that someone has persuaded him that this is good for US energy security. So a combination of this is good for your country and you are a wonderful leader, sir, may do the trick.
Fantastic. Claire, thank you very much.
Thank you. Julian and Claire, just a second. You know that I promised that the audience actually could engage in your discussion. So it's a long question, but please keep your answer short. How do you think the geopolitical situation and uncertainty will impact maritime decarbonization's progress and the type of solutions that will be adopted? What is your answer to that?
So I think, as we're seeing with the rest of the world, that these transitions will be delayed. That at the moment, investing particularly in new engine types, new ship types, this will be delayed, and existing fleet that generally is burning dirtier fuels will be prolonged. So you will see an ongoing level of emissions that you wouldn't wish to see, but then hopefully we will see the investment that will drop it later.
Thank you. Are you content with that answer too, Julian?
I think a lot will depend on the IMO, the impact of the IMO regulations that are forthcoming, the pricing of carbon, actually whether it has adequate teeth or whether it's something of a compromise too far, whether it actually drives change faster or perhaps allows people to drag their heels a little. I think there's still some debate around.
Thank you again, Julian and Claire. I would like to ask you to actually move over there, because now we are going to the panel discussion I was talking about earlier. Just a quick reminder again, you have the code that you can scan and interact with the panel. Just send your questions or comments and we will try to add them to the discussion. The panel discussion will further explore the big picture forces shaping global trade and the maritime economy. So to help us unpack these complex questions, we are joined by a truly distinguished panel. We've met Claire O'Neill, and we are also meeting President of Cargill Ocean Transportation, Mr. Jan Dieleman. And also Group President and CEO of DNV, Mr. Remy Eriksen. And the CEO of Eksfin, Mr. Harald Serk Hansen. And the CEO of ADNOC Logistics and Services, Captain Abdul Karim Al-Masabi. Take it away, Julian.
Thank you again, Lydia. And welcome to the panelists joining Claire. Now, this first session on the state of play, as it's been billed, is about the challenges of these times, the changing supply chain logistics and international trade patterns, the threats of regional conflicts, extreme weather events, and of course the push for energy efficiency and the energy transition. Many of these changes are likely to have far-reaching impacts on the industry and create fresh challenges for the industry. As I mentioned a little earlier, shipping has always shown great adaptability. It's been its strength. It is a service industry, after all. It's serving trade. Cargo moves ships, not ship owners, you could say. But what are the risks and where are the opportunities in this world today? How are you managing the disruption and the uncertainties that stand up? So if I could start perhaps with Captain Al-Masabi. From your perspective, I should add, actually, perhaps those people who don't know you from the start, that you're the CEO of ADNOC LNS, which is the tanker and logistics arm of Abu Dhabi's national oil company. So a very important strategic ship owner and logistics provider to a major world oil producer. Captain Al-Masabi, do you see this as a moment of risk, or is there real opportunity for you?
Well, we always look at these, situations as an opportunity for us, seriously. If we look at just the ADNOC Logistics and Service, or maybe the ADNOC Group companies as in totality, you see how much we have expanded in the later years. And since the last 5 years, we have been diversifying our business, but also we have been growing not only regionally or locally, but also globally. And although there is some huge uncertainties that we are seeing globally, especially this year, but we also see that there is still, great opportunities for us, whether it's be expanding, penetrating new markets as well. And when people talk about that there's uncertainties, for us, it's always this: how do we grab the opportunities? We've always looked at our strategy and how we diversify our business, but also looking at our global alliances today between the East and the West, and how we are trying basically to balance these relationships. Today, if you look at ADNOC Logistics and Service, just as a company, we are the shipping and the logistics. Our business is extremely diversified in nature. We are into all sorts of shipping, but also in the offshore logistics. But also we have global presence, whether it be from Far East to Tokyo to here to China, but also in the West when it comes to the US and even Brazil. So diversification is extremely important, but also at the same time you have to be resilient, because these turbulence, we always think that they are temporarily. They will not impact us on the long term. Shipping will always remain. It's all about how we navigate these storms. And we have been there for thousands of years, and I don't believe this is an industry that will vanish because of some tariffs or some economic decisions here and there.
Jan Dielman of Clarksons, you're chartering 650, 700 ships a year. You're right in the middle of moving a lot of agricultural and food products around the world every day. How are you dealing with the current situation?
Yeah, well, I think what was said earlier is absolutely right. We as a company have been around for more than 160 years, so we've seen this rodeo before, I would say, you could say. I think what is different, though, this time around, it's not just disruptions, it's the pace of disruption and the sheer amount. I think that is something that is new. That is something that I think the industry is struggling a little bit with at the moment. And mainly the consequence of that is, and I think that is something that is also for the energy transition a little bit worrying. There's a little bit of a paralyzation, I would say, in decision making at the moment. And hopefully we can get used to this new world quick enough, so we can continue to invest for the future, because I think we're getting a little bit to a standstill.
But the problem is, it isn't about volumes as such as yet. It's about the structural organisation of trades.
Exactly.
How would you start to address those challenges? Do you literally walk day by day through your trading book?
Wow, in the spot market, you have to go day by day, and it's actually getting quite complicated, because what is on the one day, it's off the next day. So it's quite problematic. But I think what you need to do is you need to keep on having your focus on a little bit further horizon and make sure that you don't get distracted by all this noise, which I think was actually said earlier. And you stay the course. And I think what is important for a company like ours and for everyone, I think, involved in shipping, it's you have to have a lot of optionality, you have to have a global footprint, and you have to have a portfolio. And I think if you have those things, you can weather a lot of storms.
Harold, could I turn to you? You watched the green transition, the energy transition very closely within DNB Bank for the trends that may be upcoming. Do you see the current disruption and uncertainties as driving a slowdown in that, a significant slowdown in that process, particularly when you start looking at shipping?
Well, I think there are definitely slowdowns. There are more bottlenecks than people expected. But in the long term, I think what we see now is largely a bump in the road, because it's not, the digitalization and internet didn't stop with the dot-com crisis in 1999. And I think it's the same with renewable. And we see it actually moving full speed ahead. We never financed more renewable energy projects around the world than today, even in the US. And but it used to be driven by what you could call greenwashing, public relations, reporting. Today it's driven by the fact that in most countries and most states in the US, solar and wind is cheaper than coal. So it makes sense from a commercial point of view.
Remy Eriksson, you're in the thick of helping people with the transition and the risk management of that process as much as anything. Do you believe this is a bump in the road, or are we looking at deeper structural problems?
I think it's broadly a bump in the road. I think also when we talk about the energy transition, we see that decarbonization and energy security go in the same direction, particularly when you talk about the part of the system that can be electrified. Solar, wind, so the power grid. While they're not so easy to electrify, shipping and aviation, they will probably see some delays in the way we can decarbonize those sectors. Mm-hmm. But we have been around also for more than 160 years. We are in 100 different countries, and we have seen changes in trade patterns. We have seen changes in where ships are being built. We are seeing changes in where oil and gas discoveries have been made, where renewables have been developing. So I think the long-term picture is that the cost of renewables is coming down, and that will help to electrify and clean the power grid.
Claire, you mentioned that this state of disruption is likely to be permanent, or at least semi-permanent in the medium term. What are the implications for that?
Well, I think we're having a disruptive period that will coalesce around a new normal.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting to listening to the panel is all of these companies have been here a long time and have weathered. I loved your point, Harold, about we didn't suddenly throw away the internet when all those companies crashed with the dot-com crisis. Clean tech has been through several investment waves now. What is happening is a lot of the hot investment is coming out. So companies, capital, operators, drillers who were in there because they thought it was the right time to make a quick buck, they will go. And in a way, we then have a more stable industry. And what's, of course, so important about all of the operators here is their ability to be part of new offtake agreements, investments in new technology, new financing structures. The incumbents have an incredible role to play, actually, in really pulling this transition along.
Harold, can I ask you about the role of the dollar? It seems shocking to even be thinking about this, but the dollar has been pivotal to shipping and international trade for the last 70 years. It is the reserve currency of the world. It has been resilient in the face of many crises. But just yesterday I saw Morgan Stanley suggesting that it might decline in value by up to 9% in the next year. Is there a long-term shift in the resilience of the dollar as the currency of international trade?
Well, I think the role of the dollar as a reserve currency has already started to erode. If you go 10 years back, it was 65%. Today, it's less than 60%. But it's happening very slowly, and it will take a long, long time. And there are two reasons for that. One is that world currencies tend to die very slowly. Look at the British pound. It kept its position long time after Britain had lost its dominant position politically and economically. So that's one reason. The second reason is there is no alternative. You know, look at the RMB. It's less than 3% of world reserves. It's actually come down over the last 5 years. And you know, there will be a gradual build-up in other currencies, but there is no alternative. But that's very different. The US government is adamant they want to keep the US dollar as a world currency, and they threaten to punish countries that try to build up an alternative currency. But they want to weaken the dollar. And I think they're doing a very good job weakening the dollar, and I think that will continue.
Over the last few months, for very obvious reasons, there's been a lot of attention on the US, on Donald Trump, on the White House. But I think for shipping, the counter-argument to that, counter-issue to that is China. Where does China sit for future shipping market growth? It's the world's biggest shipbuilder, over 50% of ships delivered last year, 70% of the orders last year. 25% of world trade is Chinese. US, I think it's about 6%. Captain Al-Masabi, this increased polarization, division between East and West, and particularly the antagonism between the US, the outright trade war, let's be blunt about it, between the US and China. What are the implications for you as effectively a cross-trader? How do you manage those tensions?
That's a very good question, because we've been hearing about it since Trump came in power, and especially about the port tariffs, if you would say. And I think the latest legislation that we have seen, I've seen the draft and the outcome, on us, I would say it's minimal impact. I mean, of course, we do have partners as well, because as I said earlier, we do have a diversified balance in terms of portfolio, and we do have some Chinese interests as well. So that will have maybe some impact, but again, it was not as much as we had read and heard about initially. So there will be impact, minimal impact, I would say, in terms of the shipping and the port tariffs. But again, I think as an industry, we are used to such regulations, and I think we have been expert in terms of how we move around these obstacles and these difficulties. There are facts, I think, that nobody can ignore. China is a major power when it comes to export. And definitely they will be dominating it for the next few decades. And nobody can ignore the fact that major exports will continue to come from China. And it's all about how we basically manage the logistics, or maybe manage these tariffs and economics impact, whether it be from USA or maybe the other European partners. But in shipping and logistics, today the demand is still bullish, I would say. Yes, maybe the rates have softened, but in the long run, definitely we still see that the growth is there. It's expected by 2035, population will grow by up to 9 billion. Electricity demands will grow by another 70% in the next decade as well. So again, there's a huge growth that is fueling the economy, and I think it's almost like we need to focus on what is required. Is it call for actions, call for policies that are pro-investments, pro-growth, pro-people, pro-energy? That's what we should always just look at and maybe drive our policies and action against.
Remy, on China and shipbuilding, has the shipping industry rather walked into a big problem here? Has it gone for cheap product, easily delivered, and now you have a monopoly provider that is politically at odds with a large chunk of the world?
Well, we have seen changes in shipbuilding capacity over the years, you know, from Europe to Japan to South Korea and China. It takes time to build up shipbuilding capacity. And also the quality in China, you said cheap, yeah, well, it's good prices, but it's also extremely high quality. And the quality improvements we have seen over the past 10, 15 years is unbelievable. So it's also a matter of the quality. It's not only about the prices. And I think it will be hard to build up within a few years shipbuilding in other locations that are not into shipbuilding today. So for instance, building up shipbuilding capacity in the US will take decades to get to the right price level, to get to the quality levels that we see in China, in South Korea, and in Japan, which are the three biggest ones today.
Jan Dielman, this polarized world has its, I was about to say brightest, darkest expression through the dark fleet, the shadow fleet. We now have nearly 1,500 tankers that are directly sanctioned by the West. The total fleet is around, total dark fleet is around 25% of the tanker fleet. What are the implications of the dark fleet today for the future of having this bifurcation of one set of ships working on one set of rules, or no rules in some case, and another set of ships working elsewhere?
Yeah, for me, it's very worrying. Also, the way we talk about it, I hear a lot of people talk about the dark fleet and then start talking about something else again. But those are ships that share the same ocean, go to the same port, and are basically, at the moment, very poorly governed. So I think there is a role to be played here. Maybe it's the IMO or whatever organization you want to put in there, because we have to make sure that this doesn't become a real issue. And I think when people talk about sanctions, a lot of times they don't understand what kind of side effects you have, which could be really devastating. So I think it's something that we need to put a lot more in the spotlight. We need to talk a lot more as an industry about, and really trying to make sure that this doesn't become a bigger problem than it is already today. Hopefully we're going to get some peace talks in some of the conflict zones, and that might maybe help a little bit on the sanction side and then also on the dark fleet. But today, I think it's a much bigger problem than the industry is actually willing to acknowledge.
And I think, again, I was very struck looking at what the US was doing with flag countries, basically saying to Panama, you've just got to delist a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, this has not really happened before, and it will be interesting to see what happens with any sanctions directed towards India. Because if you're Mr. Trump and you want to try and bring the Ukraine war to an end, you know that Russia's economy is still doing much better than you ever thought because it's able to sell its oil. So what do you then do to try and deal with the knock-on effect of that? And this, I think, is fairly unprecedented for governments to really start to delve into some of the workings. It's quite a small number of vessels. And my experience from Windward is we know where they are. We can see what they're doing. We can also see what hostile ships are doing if they're monitoring assets. We have all the data. We just lack political will.
Thank you very much indeed. Let me just hand back to Lydia. We may have a question.
Well, actually, we need to round up.
We need.
And the thing you have in your ear doesn't work. That's why you don't know anything, and I know more than you. So
That's
sorry
been
about
said
that.
quite often, by the way.
But I would, yes, all the red figures are here. Thank you very much, panel, for this interesting question. Thank you, Julian. You'll be back anyway.
Indeed.
Thank you. A big hand to them all. Before we continue, I would like to thank the Crown Prince for attending here today. I know that the Crown Prince needs to go, but we would like to wish you all the best for future maritime activities. All rise, please. Thank you again. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now we move into second main theme of today, shipping, technology, and decarbonisation. To help us look ahead, we are honored to welcome a global leader in both business and climate action. He is the founder of Fortescue, one of the world's largest iron ore and green energy companies. And he has pledged to give away his wealth to tackle the world's most urgent challenges, from climate change and modern slavery to humanitarian crisis. Please welcome Dr. Andrew Forrest.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously honoured to be here. Secretary Kerry, thank you for joining us. For all of you in Norway, please pass on to your royal families that there is very serious hope in the world. I don't address you as an optimist, I address you as a realist. I am aware I'm part of a group of 80 climate scientists around the world who are watching the heat waves happen in the ocean at scales we've never seen. We're watching fish flee intercontinentally, not to be able to breed and to feed, which is what we all do, but just to breathe. We are facing into a very serious consequence for inaction. But I'm here to speak to you about action. Personally, I can see complete solution for what is happening on the surface of the ocean, and then just as critically, what is happening between the waves. We cannot address one without the other. The answer is both. The answer is, without a healthy ocean, you will not have healthy lives, each of us in this audience.
After living for nearly 100 years on this planet, I now understand the most important place on Earth is not on land, but at sea.
So if I could just share with you that these are the triple threats. We've got plastic piling into the ocean. We've got these oceanic heat waves causing acidification. As waters warm, they expel their oxygen. That's why entire fish populations are moving, creating proper food sovereign risk. And of course, pollution in shipping. We have solutions. If I could just introduce you to my friend Sweetie. This was part of my PhD. This little lady has a metre long between her gape. She's about 4 metres from her tail, 4.5 metres to her snout. And while she looks a bit scary, big fish like this breed at almost 2,000 times more than post-juvenile, early maturity, same species. Could be snapper, could be others. Protecting big old fat females, this is a scientific term called BOF, is critical. But that's not what we in the fishing industry do. I happen to love fishing. I have 100 odd ships on the water at any one time. Terrestrial operations alone, you can imagine oceanic, these are big ships. We carry 250,000 tonnes of iron ore. We shift 1 billion tonnes a year. Our trucks go around the world autonomously, burning diesel 1.5 times every day. I am part of the problem. To be very clear, consumers, public, you are not. You have every right to consume plastic, which becomes compostable. You have every right to fly wherever you want to. It's the energy companies who are getting it completely wrong, giving you energy that is going to poison you. Steel companies, iron ore companies must give you green iron ore and green steel. That is our responsibility. You should hold us to account. Just stopping buying this and that, depriving yourself of this and that, honestly, you're just doing exactly what the fossil fuel sector script to you. Please do this to preserve their industry. Feel guilty, do nothing. No, you have a voice. Hold energy producers, hold metal producers, hold heavy industry to account. That is where the pollution is. And this is, as you can see, the escalating temperatures which we're seeing and the consequences. As the ocean heats, it evaporates. Now, this is really scary. Once again, optimist, but also a realist. The ocean is an infinite source of humidity. Humidity is the problem. It is not temperature. You're thermoregulated individuals. If I switch up this temperature to 45 degrees in this room, you're going to be okay. If I switch it up to, say, 30 degrees and the humidity up over 90, you're probably going to die because humidity switches off your evolutionary advantage to handle heat. And that's what is happening with our oceans. It's expelling huge amounts of energy. If you want to know where your massive drying events are going to come from, 15% of the EU economy, agriculture, under threat. your massive heating events are going to come from, and your aggressive flooding events, America's totally predictable, unnatural disasters. From the acceleration in humidity, humidity is rising, ladies and gentlemen, at 7 to 10 times the speed of heat is rising. And we'll probably hit 2% by 2030, where we've gone up 0.5% in the last couple of years. So we have to stop emissions. Fortescue, my company, is going real zero as a result. We believe this word net is a complete con. We've had the worst ravages of our climate, the highest acceleration in temperatures since this word net came along. It excuses action. And action is what we need most. So this is what's happening. For instance, there's a little continent called Australia. This is my scientists, that very pretty reef there, that's called dead reef. That's bleached reef from a heat wave. You'll see this right up and down the Great Barrier Reef. Makes $7-8 billion a year for Australia. It's bleaching everywhere. This is a turning point. But we can also know that the threat to the ocean, apart from global warming, which I want to speak to you in a moment, is fishing. This is what is happening since 1995, when technology started to really accelerate in the fishing industry. No matter how good that tech got, it couldn't escape the fact that fish populations were diving. All it's doing now is cleaning up the scraps, what's left. We have ocean decimation, 75% of commercial stocks, overfished, exploited, or collapsed. Of course, scientifically endorsed papers, ladies and gentlemen. Marine protected areas are the solution. I want to reach out to the fishing industries of Norway and the world. There is no mining company who's responsible or who's have half a brain who would not quarantine 30% of their ore body, that's all, to be able to mine the other 70% forever. If I took your loaf of bread, tore off nearly a third of it, and said, with this other 70%, you don't ever have to buy another loaf of bread. That's literally the miracle of the oceans. But it's no take, ladies and gentlemen. Ocean trawling, as depicted in the film which we funded, Ocean by David Attenborough. It's an epic film. It's coming out now. We will be showing it here in Oslo in the next couple of days. I strongly recommend you watch it. How does it work? Well, quite simply, it protects a full range of the critical species. We obviously put this 30% in ecologically sensitive areas and wildlife aggregation hotspots. The result in 5 years is at least 50%. 50% increase. Now, scientists argue over this. They say, no, Andrew, that's way too conservative. It's way more. I'm prepared to cop that. We all know as financiers, if you got 50% return in 5 years, that'd be cool. What would be better is that you got a 400 to 500% return in 10 years. That you're not going to get anywhere else. That scientific consensus is on. So this is the miracle of our oceans. Protect 30%. Government, it's you regulators. The fishing industry is going to do what you regulate. If you listen to this hogwash that you should partially protect, you should have, and by the way, try running it past your public before they go to elections, that, the marine protected areas, we're just kidding. They're just paper parks. We allow midwater fishing, or we allow the most destructive form of fishing on Earth, which is bottom trawling. This is in your marine protected areas. They'll say, well, you're smoking drugs. Where do we get that from? I mean, that is not MPAs. So we're talking real no-take protected areas will give you that spectacular result. So this is again an argument between myself and other oceanic scientists. Some say it's up by 500%. I'm just prepared to say we double it. If you look across MPAs, you've got worldwide endorsement. And those who don't enforce it aren't part of it. Now, just a quick one on enforcement. Everyone's worried about enforcement. John Kerry spoke of his time where they got surplus naval and other assets to do the enforcement. Well, many countries don't have that, but what we all have is a competitive fishing industry. Fishing companies cut each other's throat. I just want to be blunt. If we put in place, just like the Australian Mining Act, that if someone goes into a marine protected area, like they all do now, and you're spotted by a member of your industry, you can plaint, which means you can recognise that that vessel has gone into a protected area, and you demonstrate it, easy with the satellite. Can't dodge that, can't put a wok over the transponder anymore. You're spotted by a satellite. Your licence goes to the person who made the complaint. It's how the mining industry in Australia works. There's next to no government funding, and it's perfectly regulated because we, competitive miners, make sure everyone else behaves. Otherwise, we pick up their mine just for the cost of making a plaint. So there is ways to do this. And this is that oil reserve issue. I'm speaking to BHP, I'm speaking to Rio Tinto, I'm speaking to others, and they're just saying, Andrew, what, we keep 30%, we can mine the other 70% forever? Of course. I said, well, that's not what the fishing industry does. The fishing industry is in this race to the bottom to have no fish. So that's a real issue. And of course, the other one I just want to leave you with is something I really firmly believe in. This is a Fortescue ship, runs on ammonia. Pretty cool ship. But what's way cooler is that we haven't dug anything out of the ground to secure the future of this ship. This is the future of the shipping industry. You need only wind and sun, which the energy from which is collapsing in cost, mixed with a derivative of air and a derivative of water. We're not going to run out. That's going to be there for air, ever. Air, wind and sun, water. And you get an extremely potent pollution-free fuel. It expels nitrogen, which, by the way, trees love. Can't exist without it. It's a perfect shipping fuel, and it's coming down fast in cost. I do believe the IMO's on the right track, and I say to everyone here, particularly if you're not from Norway, do not tolerate your countries voting against or abstaining from the IMO vote in October. Vote for it. This will lead shipping, one of the worst polluters in the world. I love the way we hear, you know, it's very, very efficient way to get goods around. It's the most ecologically efficient. Compared to what? I mean, I don't want to be stabbed to death when I could have been shot. I'm not quite sure. So it is a really dirty industry. My 100 ships, they're really dirty. And by mid-2030s, if our growth keeps going, we do nothing, it's going to go to 10% of the global carbon budget. Humans, you can't afford that. You cannot afford that. You cannot let that happen. So this is real life, of course. This is the Green Pioneer going into London. I won't bore you with it all, but that is the bottom line. 10% in the 2030s if we don't move. The IMO is leading the multilateral way. Everyone thinks multilateralism is dead. Only in some deadhead quarters is it dead. But it's not dead everywhere else, as the IMO is proving. Please make sure that the 2/3 majority, which is what our brave leadership of the IMO has called for, not consensus. You've got this disaster called COP. It's consensus, means everyone has to agree. That means you're going to have your future dictated by an oil-producing nation who, when they look out of their office and see nothing but desert, think, it's pretty cool, I like it. The rest of the world can look like that too. Well, no, vote for your interests. Vote against it. So, global critical first mover, we are convincing ports around the world that this must happen. And it absolutely can happen. If I could just leave you with a simple message.
To this day, we have seen more of other planets than we have of the ocean. Now we are making discoveries that completely change our understanding and could offer a better future for everyone on Earth forever.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if I can leave you with that, 30% no-take marine parks, fish forever, flourishing oceans forever. Combine it with green ammonia for shipping, and you are changing the future of oceans, and you are switching our planet towards a sustainable future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew Forrester. Next, we'll hear a conversation on how global companies are driving sustainability across complex supply chains and what this means for shipping. So please welcome Global Sustainability Manager for Supply Chain Operations at IKEA, Ms. Elisabeth Munk. Yes, I like some music to that. And also the CEO of the Sustainable Markets Initiative, Ms. Jennifer Jordan. And leading the discussion this time is the Managing Director of Evigo, Ms. Pia Meling.
Thank you. And Claire O'Neill, if you're still here, you see we're all wearing high heels and lipstick. The Sustainable Markets Initiative and IKEA are both global organizations that view decarbonization through the lens of a multinational value chain that includes ocean transportation. You both have insights into how other industries are actually addressing decarbonization and what challenges and barriers that we see. You also have views on how you also have insights on how the views on climate change is adapting in the private sector and the public sector. So, Elisabeth, I want to start with you. Actually, we already passed the 1.5% global warming threshold that has been set by scientists. And assuming that this continues, how should we address decarbonization in your view?
That's a big question, but I really do believe we need to amplify the positive momentum that we're already seeing now and also accelerate the solutions that are there. And also we need a bit the power of optimism. And where I come from in IKEA, we actually see the momentum is building. We see that low and zero emission solutions are developing and we're implementing them across our markets. So a lot is happening on the end-to-end goods flow, so it's very positive. And more options are available, discussions are maturing, collaborations are forming. And also we have concrete examples from where I come from. Is, for example, ZEMBA, Zero Emission Maritime Buyers Alliance, with cargo owners coming together to demand zero emission solutions. Another thing is we started a biofuel pilot together with some other companies 2019. And today, the majority of the shipping lines we are working with actually offer zero emission solutions or biofuel solutions. And also in 2017, we set the target for our transportation to reduce the average emissions by -70% by 2030. And yet to date, we are down -41%. So it is moving, things are moving. It's about being persistent and just keep doing it.
Good, and you are, right? And Jennifer, you are working on private sector diplomacy, and yesterday you also had some high-level meetings here in Oslo, as I understand, on trying to bridge and translate the private sector needs with the public sector regulatory side. And maybe you could share a little bit about how you're working with that.
Sure. So the Sustainable Markets Initiative is an initiative that's private sector focused. We have over 20 different industry and financial groups with over 250 global CEOs. And the ambition is really to accelerate the transition to a sustainable future, recognizing it's the growth story of our time. So we really take an economic lens to it. But we recognize that the global goals of 2030, all the targets have been set by governments. Governments just don't have the capital to be able to make that trillion-dollar transition happen, or multi-trillion-dollar transition happen. And we really need to work in partnership with the private sector. And increasingly, we notice that the private sector can move intentionally and quickly. They can, in many ways, regulate themselves. They can come up with what works. They can figure out what's economic. And where we see the private sector diplomacy comes in is that private sector needs to provide their answers and their solutions to governments so that we can move faster together. We can't just sit and wait for governments to regulate. We need to take the actions and drive the agenda forward as a private sector.
We did talk this morning, Julian covered the geopolitics and the uncertainty and a little bit of, we have issues with ESG to have it high on the agenda with all the security policy going on. So how does that affect your work and the companies that you work for?
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, it's all about leadership. If you're a government leader or a private sector leader, I think we all know that, politics shifts on a 4-year cycle usually. And, the key thing is that we have to have a long-term view. We have to understand that, there will be stranded assets in 20, 30 years. And if we're looking at shipping and you're thinking about your assets and, how are you going to move the industry forward and where will we actually be in 20, 30 years? And what do we need to do today to make that happen? So I would say, always, some politics and the current instability that we're seeing, I think it does cause CEOs and investors to pause and saying, well, what's going on? And I have to say the past 3 or 4 months, we've all been doing that and trying to figure out what does this actually mean? Do I slow down or do I lean into it? And what we're seeing is that some of the CEOs are actively, standing up and saying that, I'm not going to slow down. And I think other CEOs need to see other, their peers standing up and saying, this is important enough. I believe in the future that we're trying to build. We've already invested a lot of money into this transition. Why would we stop now? And that's sort of the role of the SMI, is to really, galvanize the CEO leadership at the top levels and saying, peer to peer, we can get this done, and let's show them how it's done. So.
And it is supposedly good for business in the long run.
Exactly, yeah.
I think Dr. Andrew Forrest has been clear on that. And you've been working with him, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Good to hear. So Elizabeth, of course, biofuel is in a way kind of an easy option to go for, and thankfully a lot of owners are doing that. But what significant barriers do you see to the real shift into new renewable fuels and in general decarbonisation for deep sea shipping?
I do believe it's really a chicken and egg challenge that we see, or a series of chicken and egg, risking this idling mode of hoping that someone will orchestrate the full transformation in a synchronized way. That would help a lot, but it will not happen. So we have to create the solutions to continuously get the roadblocks out of the way, one by one, and really reducing the risk of acting. And for us as a cargo owner, we know it's really important that we voice our demand for zero-emission shipping, and that we share where we are heading and the journey that we are on, and also to amplify this voice together with other cargo owners.
Yeah, so you are pooling the demand in your collaboration with others. That's very important as well. But what about the risk of having stranded assets for ship owners when they don't know what fuel will be available, at what cost, of course, and where in the world it will be available, and they also don't know exactly what the regulation will say about the various fuels? So what do you say to those ship owners that are waiting to adapt their fleet because they don't know if they will have stranded assets in the end?
I mean, I understand this, and there are always risks with big investment decisions, but again, I can share how we are reasoning in IKEA. We are on our way to net zero. We have a very clear target across our whole supply chain. If we don't get zero-emission shipping, we will not reach our targets. That's how easy it is. And when it comes to fuels not being available or the infrastructure not being there, I think here is really where the collaborative approach comes in. It's about slicing this super big elephant into more manageable pieces and starting with a specific route or a flow, and the green corridor concept is already out there. So I think it's about slicing the elephant.
Are you using green corridors?
We are working on that concept as well, yeah.
That's good, because of course we need to see some concrete actions, I think, that we are actually pulling together, because we talk about collaboration so much, but we haven't really seen the results of it. Jennifer, do you have any appeal to the ship owners in the room and all the CEOs here? What do you see as, how can they help when they step out of this room today? What should they go home and focus on doing?
I mean, I think it really is about collaboration, as you're saying, and like slicing up the elephant. But sharing what you're doing. This requires an all-in approach from everyone. We also recognize that there's interdependencies, so energy is an issue. Thinking about port infrastructure is an issue. But also there's lessons from other industries like aviation. How are they looking at it? At the end of the day, it really comes down to the economics of price. Who's going to help pay for this? How do we make it, revenue positive for everyone? And the more we can leapfrog off of each other and learn from each other, the faster we can move together. And again, I love, the IKEA example. Like, they're really breaking it down. I think you're very open in sharing how you're doing things, and working with your entire supply chain. And if you hold yourselves to a standard, make sure that the rest of your supply chain is holding themselves to the same standard, because they affect you. And so I just encourage us all just to be a little bit more vocal, a little bit more open. I think that we can, head off the headwinds that we're seeing geopolitically, and just show private sector leadership more concretely.
Good. I think we are almost out of time, so we might as well be the good girls and finish early, right? And get Lydia back here to introduce the next session. Please stay until further. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you. And while you are preparing for the panel discussion, I would like actually you to watch this video.
Yes.
5 years ago, it was general consensus in industry that decarbonizing deep sea shipping was almost impossible. Now, I think we know exactly what to do.
There is an absolute urgent need to change.
That's why we are now changing the game.
The green energy industry, that technology is rising rapidly.
Emission reduction in shipping in the long term has to be around zero carbon fuels.
That is obviously the future of shipping. Green energy is going to take over the world.
This is probably our biggest innovation ever. It's the first vessel in its segment that will be ready to run on clean ammonia.
So if you get a good governance structure around this, it can attract very large amounts of capital very quickly, and it can be efficiently employed.
Let's act for our shareholders, let's act for our families, and we do that by going completely green. We should be transitioning straight into green fuels. That's where you should invest. That will protect the future of the planet.
Stop talking about why this was difficult and try to figure out how to get it done.
Yes. We now turn to a panel that brings together industry leaders and cargo owners to explore the path towards decarbonisation and the technologies that could transform shipping in the years ahead. And I again want you to interact with us and send questions through Slido, through this QR code, where you can do as you probably have done before, because we get really interesting questions. Thank you for that. Again, please welcome our panelist, founder and chairman of Fortescue, Mr. Andrew Forrest, CEO of Wallenius Wilhelmsen, Mr. Lasse Kristoffersen, CEO and president of Wärtsilä, Mr. Håkan Agnevall, Global Sustainability Manager at IKEA again, Ms. Elizabeth Munk, and CEO of the Sustainable Markets Initiative, Ms. Jennifer Jordan, is still with us. Take it away, Pia.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on stage, gentlemen, and very good speech by you. Very impressive what you're doing, Dr. Forrest, I must say. But for the rest of the industry, Decarbonization so far has been more about headlines than real action, to be honest. So there has been, of course, fleet renewal initiatives, but it's still very widespread. So actually, I want to start with you, Lasse, because you have also been working a little bit in this private sector diplomacy with IMO, for example.
Yes.
You have engaged politically, and you have a strong voice. So what is your message to the IMO and also to the EU, if you may address both?
Yeah, well, to the IMO, okay, in these days we should get the deal done, right? And make sure we get approved. I don't think the current ambition level is high enough, but the structure is a unique structure that will put a price on carbon, that will incentivize greener technologies, and I think we can tighten that platform as we move forward. And to EU, I think, of course, we need to align with what happens in IMO, but keep on pushing. I mean, we need EU. We would not have got to where we are today in IMO if EU had not been pushing. Setting up their own fuel EU, setting up, including shipping into EU ETS. So we need leadership, and we need political leadership, and we need private leadership. And then, in general, I would say, I mean, when we're sitting, listening around at these conferences, you can get a little bit depressed. I mean, things are going slow. Things are going fast. And things are going fast on energy, and you mentioned it, Andrew, that things are going fast on renewables. We are dealing a lot with car industry, and people are saying, so is this electric car thing happening? It's happening. 1 of 3 cars are sold in China. More than 50% are electric because the technology is better. So it's only the fact that industries that can't directly electrify takes a little bit longer, but it's happening.
But what if it's not approved in October?
Unthinkable.
Unthinkable. Okay.
Well, I
we
think
just have to make it happen.
I think that will happen, but then we will just keep on fighting. I think it will happen. EU will still have their regulations, and maybe we will have a more diverse regulatory landscape. But I truly believe it will happen.
And Jennifer, do you think global regulations are coming into force in time for us to really make this transition?
Again, I really think that regulation or no regulation, if the private sector pulls together industry by industry and says this is what's going to happen, you align your financing behind that, we don't need to wait for regulation. It's nice to have, but the more coordinated we are, the more effective we all can be. We shouldn't make that an excuse.
No, I agree. And then back to you, Andrew. So what certainty do you think that this net zero trajectory of IMO is giving to the industry? And is really our technology for deep sea shipping now getting to the point of a strong economic case for decarbonization?
Look, it really is. It's just saying that the industry itself, the multilateral understanding between ship owners is that we actually want a penalty for behaving badly, because for all those who want to behave well, the market gets destroyed for our operations because there are those outliers who just don't care. So what the IMO is doing is levelling the playing field. It's also taking a view on encouraging very much new fuels, if it's biofuel or anything with C in the supply chain, like methane or ethane or synthetics, then it's short term, because we don't want to ever be an industry with our massive scale, which is seen competing against the food industry, deforesting because we think we can sell to the public that we're not emitting carbon. That'll be seen for what it is. So I do note that the IMO understands that you've got this infinite source of energy from sun, wind, air and water, and we should tap into that. Also, the IMO is taking a view on a very dangerous greenhouse gas, which is LNG. And I know I'm in the land of LNG here, so I hope I walk out of this room safely. But all I can say is that LNG is a fancy name for methane. Methane is 80 to 100 times more dangerous in the next 20 years, where it really counts, than carbon as a global warming agent. So stopping the great con that LNG is somehow a stepping stone into a green world, that would actually be a stepping stone into fixing the shipping industry into a dangerously polluting world. So I really do applaud the IMO and just say, move us to a green future. Tell us where you need your ammonia bunkering, The market will put it there for you, and then the market will compete savagely to get you the lowest cost of fuel.
Hopefully it will. So Håkon, I want to turn to you, as you are, of course, producing also engines and a lot of other equipment. So to make these new fuels a reality, of course, it requires a lot of collaboration between ports and shipping company, fuel producers, equipment suppliers. And how do you address all this complexity when you are planning your investments?
So basically, in Wärtsilä, we serve both the marine industry but also the energy industry with power plants. We have a saying, green is not black or white. There is no one single simple solutions, but there will be some major solutions going forward. And it's about different type of fuels, it's about abatement solutions, about AI, we will talk about that. For us, the cooperative approach is really, really important. And if we start, we have actually changed, and it's for us as an industrial company, and we acknowledge we are part of the problem. I mean, we certainly provide engines running on fossil fuels, heavy fuels, although LNG, but we're also part of the solution, bringing the engines for the future to the market. And we will do so. Cooperation is key. We are evolving how we develop things. We just made our biggest investment in our Sustainable Technology Hub, where we actually invent together with some of you here, some of our customers, but also with universities. So the innovation landscape is changing. Cooperation is key. I mean, bringing it here. Our cooperation with Adismeek, our first four-stroke full ammonia engine being delivered, and that's a milestone in the whole industry. But it's more than ammonia. We're also here in Norway launching carbon capture for the marine sector, working together with Solvang. So cooperation is very, very concrete. I think we all talked about MEPC 83. Is it big enough? Is it good enough? No. But it's a major step forward, and it is in the world. It is the world's first that a whole industry hopefully takes this step. It's really critical. Then on the technical side, multi-fuel capability is key. That is kind of insurance. You make sure that you not get stranded stuck with a stranded asset. And I would like to challenge a little bit what was said in some earlier panels. We see a lot of things happening. We don't see things sliding. Because anybody who invests in a vessel today knows that I will have this vessel probably for 25, 30 years. So I need to deal with decarbonization, whether it's going to happen this year or in 4 years or in 5 years, because it will happen in 25 years. And that's when we interact with a lot of our customers. We see a lot of thinking and discussions, because it's not an easy journey. But I would say that shipping is moving right here, right now. MEPC is very important. God forbid, even if it doesn't happen, I still think that shipping will move on.
Yeah, at least we're all talking about it now. And if it's like Fuel EU, an incentive to do over-compliance, and you can bank it or you can pool it, that will be very good for the early movers, hopefully. And back to you, Elizabeth, as one of these early movers in the Zero Emission Maritime Buyers Alliance. I mean, there are so many alliances and charters and clusters that one can engage in. But I really like the idea of pooling this demand. But could you share a little bit more about what concrete results have come out of this collaboration?
Well, the whole purpose of SEMBA is to catalyze change with concrete actions and real results. So we joined SEMBA as the first member 2 years ago, and now there are more than 40 cargo owners that are members, so it's a really good progress. And what SEMBA does is aggregating the demand for zero emission solutions. And it's not just about sending a signal, it's really converting this signal into concrete procurement. And right now we're in the second tender phase that is focusing only on e-fuels. And the magnitude is about 1.5 million 20-foot containers on the Pacific Ocean with e-fuels on a distance equal to Shanghai to LA. So it's moving.
That's good to hear. You have a comment?
You know, I just wanted to add, I wish I had IKEA in as a customer to us. I mean, we are moving cars and heavy equipment, the Volvos, the Fords, Caterpillars, John Deeres of the world. And when I joined this company 3 years ago, I thought they were knocking on our door and said, come on, guys, show us some lower emissions.
Yep.
Nothing, zero. So what we had to do was to develop a product, go out to our customers and tell them, you guys need to start to act now. And that took quite some courage from our people, to be honest. The easiest drive was down to Gothenburg, to Volvo, where Swedish companies, I think, are well advanced when it comes to sustainability. It was much tougher to go to Korea and Japan, but they also joined. Still, the US companies are a little bit behind, but coming. So over the last 2 years, when we have renewed our contracts with our major customers, more or less all of them have an element of paying more for lower emissions. And we have a service called Reduced Carbon Service. You pay up 10%, you get 25% lower emissions from Asia to Europe, and they buy it. We have invited customers to join us to say, let's make a demonstration in 2027. We can have the first car or equipment delivered end-to-end, net zero, and we have several customers looking at that. But they don't look, I mean, you don't talk to Volvo about what you do globally, but Volvo says, where do you have your most conscious customer? Well, we think it's in Switzerland. Okay, let's start with Switzerland. Let's make a product. Or in California, or hopefully Andrew in Australia. Let's see. I'll buy your fuel if you buy my
It's good that you can strike a deal right here.
I love it.
But we are halfway on our time, more or less. We also want to cover a bit on digitalization, the other hot topic, and it's fair to say that shipping has maybe not been the front runner in adopting new technology for many reasons. Also, we haven't had great connectivity on board our ships until recently. But I want to continue with you, Lasse. You were very vocal about this in your previous role in Klaveness as well. So what does it really take for us to embrace like transformative digital technology?
Well, I think we need to look at this on two different levels. Most of us are companies like any other companies where we are producing knowledge and management for operations. That's very similar. So when we are a management company, we're similar to many other companies of the world. The real particular challenge for us is, of course, when it comes to the vessels. And how do we deploy technology on the vessels? And that was, if I was negatively surprised when I joined this company 3 years ago on climate, I was very positively surprised on the investments done on digital infrastructure. Worked for years to build step by step and digitize our vessels, make them digital capable, connecting them, so we can deploy technology. And we are now deploying a lot of technology on our vessels. One of the things we're doing is we're using AI to optimize the speed. You have a time of departure and you have an arrival time. And within that, you have weather, you have so many things you need to optimize, and we have technology that at any given time give the optimal speed. That has reduced our emissions by somewhere in the range of 5%, just that single technology. Now we will evolve that, also look into which route should you choose, because that's not done yet. But it has taken years to really build that digital infrastructure. And then I just need to say, and be honest about that, at the back of that, there is a growing vulnerability. Because we are taking all our operational technology online, and they're getting available to people with bad intentions, and they will be able to attack them. So I think as an industry, we have come a little bit away on digitizing assets, but I don't think we have really taken proper efforts to protect them from cybercrime.
No, it's a new risk. And I have lots of more questions, but I understand, Lydia, the audience has been active as well. So you have
very interesting questions, actually. Yes.
Yeah, let's switch to you guys then.
Okay, I'll give you the first one. What do you think about using nuclear energy on commercial vessels in relation to achieving net zero and decarbonisation of maritime?
Who wants to answer that one? Are you into nuclear?
Look, I know a lot about small nuclear or modular reactors. I was working with Gates 20 years ago. I thought I'd put one on a ship and sail it up to New Delhi and plug it in. They're immensely difficult outside of military applications. And for me, you know, I'm a major funder of Gaza. I'm a major supporter of Ukraine. I see what bad actors are capable of doing. And I'm really concerned about nuclear proliferation. I also know that, all the good news about nuclear is up front. If you ask any one of the very responsible engineers in France much will it cost to rehabilitate those 14 sites, nuclear sites which need to be taken down? There's no cost estimate. So we have no idea. So yeah, I'm just not sure that it's necessary when you've got alternative, pollution-free, readily available fuels which can be made all around the world and can't harm anyone.
And Pia, maybe some other
views on
panelists
this?
can...
Yeah. Anybody who feels like this could be a part of the solution?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see if it was safe and it was available and it was affordable. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And I think the problem with the discussion around nuclear is that we always say in 10 years it will come, and then it creates inaction. Let's wait for another 10 years to see what happens. And if we're really good and really optimistic, maybe we have something in 10 years. I don't believe so.
But then we have to start now, in case. Yeah, we have a
but let's rather start with what we know that works.
Yeah.
We know that ammonia works with no emissions. We know we have bridging fuels with methanol and bio. Let's start now.
I think we have to move to the next question, right?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Here comes another one. So, how can shipping community come together to bring alternative fuels to regional smaller trades, such as coastal Africa, where investment is scarce?
Well, coastal Africa has massive renewable energy. I'm not sure if it's on the west coast, the east coast, north coast, south coast, but they've got one thing in common: truckloads of renewable energy. So I advocate that the multilateral banks should remove the risk which businesses cannot take, which is sovereign risk, egregious taxation risks like tax 50% in the state and 50% in the federation. So it's basic expropriation by another name. That has to be controlled by those countries which make up, say, the African Union, to make sure that they don't have errant bad actors. All other risk businesses can take: technology, implementation, construction, marketing, supply. We take those risks, but sovereign risk should be taken off us by the sovereigns of that continent.
Yeah. Lydia, thank you so much. Then we will continue with my questions, because I have lots more. And how can you wanted to have a comment before, so you can do that now, right?
No, it was more on the nuclear. I think there are two challenges. There are the financial ones. I mean, it will likely be expensive, and also if you consider refueling it, you don't do it so often, but when you potentially refuel it, would take quite some time. Then the other key element is, of course, security and safety. And I think, so let's continue to explore it. I wouldn't rule it out, but the point that was made here, we have much lower hanging fruits that enables the transition, which is really needed right here, right now.
And of course, there's a lot we can do, as we already discussed in many conferences, on the sailing fleet, actually on energy efficiency and digitalization and smart routing and all
if
this.
we are concerned about dark fleet, let's imagine it was nuclear.
Yeah.
Right. Very good point.
It's not, thank God. But I'd like to continue with you, Håkon, because about AI, that is the big buzzword that everybody's talking about. How do you see the potential and the pitfalls for the shipping industry from your point of view?
I mean, there is huge potential. I mean, we already talked about it, and I would even broaden it outside of the vessel itself. It's the port system, it's the whole thing. And there lies also a bit of the crux. Because if you really take the system approach, even if you sail from A, and you know that better than me, but even if you sail from A to B and you follow the schedule, once you arrive to B, some port will say, well, it's good, you made it in time, but you will lay here for anchor for 3 or 4 or 5 days because, sorry, we are busy. And then you have burnt fuel. And working with that system approach, using the digital tools, has proven to be rather challenging. We have a very siloed system. And to break those silos has not been so easy. It requires cooperation, but it also requires pioneers opening up. Because so far, in our view, in the marine industry, people want to keep their own data because it feels close to your heart and you're building your kind of operational profile around it. And I think this is one of the cruxes. There is great opportunities. It was mentioned before, fleet optimization, route management, optimizing the whole system. And thereby improving uptime, reliability, reducing fuel consumption, reducing emissions. Challenges, cybersecurity, clearly. And here, this is also a topic that is not black or white, but we clearly need to move down the path. And then another significant challenge, upskilling of all the sailors. And I think we need to work consciously so we don't get into this discussion about AI is going to replace all the sailors. In my view, it won't happen. But we need to upskill the sailors because we will use the digital toolbox, including AI, to help people making better decisions.
Yeah. Did you have a short?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add, because, I mean, the reality is that most of us are not really in the shipping business. We are working with customers that are moving a car from inland China to a distribution center in Oslo. And that's what they measure. That's the emissions they measure. That's the efficiency they measure. That's where we deploy technology now at scale, and where we see that AI can improve this. It's an immense number of silos, total lack of transparency across those value chains, not only in the segments we're in, but also in most of the segments. And we have decided we're going to try to fix that on behalf of our customers. We have called it connecting the dots. Basically, how can we make sure that by connecting the dots, we can drive down costs, drive down emissions, and make sure that goods flow effectively across vessels, terminals, trucking, and everything. And that's really, really what matters to our customers.
It's a big undertaking.
We always have big undertaking and big ambitions. You know, Norwegian companies are leading in this industry, and I think we should be proud of that.
That's good. So Jennifer, when you retire, thankfully many, many years from now, what do you want to be remembered for? What will people say about you that you achieved through your work?
Well, I guess I take a lot of inspiration from His Majesty King Charles III, who has been campaigning on this for 50 years. And I just want to be sort of remembered for, using my seat wisely, which is what I call on all of our CEOs and world leaders to do, is that it's a very privileged opportunity to be in a leadership position. I think when you're a CEO, you see a breadth, and when you're a world leader, like a president or prime minister, you have a breadth of view that very few people have. So you can see the long term, you can see all the silos at the top, and you can connect those dots better. And you have to use that, really intelligently to make the world better. And if you don't, you've really wasted your time. And I genuinely think that you should step aside and let somebody else who's going to do the job do it.
I think we'll actually close on that very wise comment. So it's all up to you also to do this. Either do the job or step down.
Thank you.
If you say you can't do it, you're right. Get off the stage, let on someone who can.
Thank you very much for this. Thank you. Well, that wraps our second section on shipping technology and decarbonization. We'll now take a 10-minute break, and I hope you can find something to maybe put in your stomach or some coffee. And then we'll be back here for the third and final part of today's program, which will be financing and the future of shipping. See you back here shortly.
But the path is complex. To meet these challenges, we need insight, urgency, and leadership. It's an honor to have her with us today. Let's hear it for your wonderful host, Lydia Capolicchio.
Thank you. It's always a fun thing to check how people pronounce my name. So I say to the guys and girls here, think of Pinocchio. It's the same thing, Capolicchio. Very easy. Before we continue, we have to say thank you to these amazing musicians. The music you have heard is specially composed for this occasion by the composer and music producer Ingrid Kindem, with also always with their companions, these brilliant musicians. Give them a big hand. Thank you, guys and girls. So, welcome back. We now begin the third and final section for today, financing the future of shipping. While access to capital is not the issue, knowing where and how to invest is increasingly complex. To help us frame this vital conversation, we're pleased to welcome a key figure from the heart of the financial markets. Please welcome the CEO of Euronext Oslo Børs, Mr. Øyvind Amundsen.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, and dear guests. It's a great honor to stand before you today at the Nor-Shipping 2025 Ocean Ship Leadership Conference and talk about financing the future of shipping. Nor-Shipping is the largest shipping expo in the world and a very important place for Euronext Oslo Børs to meet friends from the industry, investor side, advisors, and other stakeholders. And thank you so much for inviting me. Before I dive into the more importance of a well-functioning capital market for shipping and why Oslo has become the global leading hub for ship finance, I would like to start with a broader look at the capital markets and the changes we have witnessed over the past decades and the rapid shifts occurring today. Following the Enron scandal in 2001 and the financial crisis in 2008, regulatory burdens in the US increased significantly. Measures like the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and Dodd-Frank Act were introduced to prevent such crises from occurring again. But they also added substantial administrative burdens for the listed companies. This led to international companies, particularly SMEs, started to seek alternatives, and many started to look to Oslo. And Oslo started to grow slowly as a shipping hub. However, Europe followed the US in expanding regulations. Eventually, we passed it in terms of banking and finance regulations, and our competitive advantage suddenly turned. And this shift lent into the perception that US innovate, Europe regulate. And that was actually not a good progress. But last year, the Draghi report highlighted that 30% of European unicorns moved their headquarters to the US. And the main reason was easier access to capital and better business scaling opportunities. According to Draghi, the EU regulations are too inconsistent and limiting for business. Financing was also too fragmented, but both on national level, but also on EU level. So we started to see a negative shift crossing over the Atlantic. So when Ursula von der Leyen was re-elected as president for the EU Commission last year, European competitiveness was highest on her agenda. Reducing the regulatory burdens became her first priority. The first step was the Omnibus Act. The aim of this act is to reduce the administrative burden of blue chips companies with 25%, but for SMEs, so much as 35%. In addition to regulatory challenges we have experienced in the last decades, we also face a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape. Recent years have brought global pandemic, ongoing military conflicts in Europe and Palestine, and escalated tension between major powers like China and Taiwan. But we also see shifts in the historic relationships between Europe and the United States. And all these changes contributes to market volatility, not only in the US or Europe, but all over the world. But despite this challenge, Europe is still an attractive destination for capital, supported by regulatory stability and resilient ecosystems. The shift presents an opportunity for Europe, and we must use it to strengthen our capital markets. As part of the Euronext Group, this shift we are supporting with all means available to us, and we're going to use it to the best of the market participants. Norway's long maritime history, which started actually before the Viking Age, has laid the foundation for our strong, innovative shipping sector. Oslo, in particular, has emerged as a leader in maritime finance. Despite not having a visible fleet like, for example, you see in Singapore with all the ships outside the coast, Oslo was in 2024 ranked as the third most important city for ship finance in the world, only after New York and London. Who would believe that? And this achievement is not by chance. This is due to an unique ecosystem that includes leading shipping banks, as DNB sitting here, top-tier investment banks, highly skilled analysts, and investors surrounding the innovative and fast-changing maritime sector we have in Norway. And this has also been important drivers for Euronext Oslo Børs. This has made us becoming the world's leading listing venue for shipping companies. Many point on New York. I say, no, New York is the hub. That is the most important and biggest shipping listing venue in the world. But it's not like that anymore. The last significant shipping IPO in New York was in 2021. In Oslo, we have had 10 listings in the shipping since that date. And when you look at other markets, like Singapore, as I mentioned, you see all the ships outside the coast. You have all the shipping companies, global. You have the offices there in the skyscrapers. You have BW Group with what is it, 7 companies here in Oslo. But you don't see any listings at the top tier Singapore Stock Exchange because they don't want shipping companies. They don't want that volatility and cyclic business. They want real estate REITs. So that gives a great opportunity for Oslo, where you have the competence, you have the investor knowing the business to actually grow this business further. Today, there's no other stock exchange in the world with more shipping companies listed than Euronext Oslo Børs. And as I said, because for shipping, this is a strategic business area for Oslo Børs. In addition, our market is not only active on equities, but also in corporate bonds, where significant capital has been raised for shipping. And in recent years, more shipping high-yield bonds have been listed in Oslo than the rest of the world combined. Further, the Nordic banks plays a crucial role in lending to shipping companies. So we are present with all the big areas, both on the equity side, the bond side, but also the bank lending. All have the hub in Norway. However, we must recognize that our leadership is not guaranteed. Earlier, we learned that financial markets were sticky. Liquidity did not move, and listings were local. But this is not the fact anymore. Today, liquidity does move, and listings have become global. The market players choose the markets that find the best. To maintain our position in Oslo, I believe there are 3 key areas we should focus on. 3 main areas. Of course, many other areas as well, but I will today focus on 3 main areas. The first one is that we must continue to strengthen the collaboration. Oslo's success is rooted in its holistic shipping ecosystem, where companies, banks, brokers, analysts, lawyers, investors, insurance companies, etc., work in close synergy with a high level of knowledge of the industry. This collaboration is essential for attracting companies seeking capital from the maritime sector. We must ensure that the competence within the sector is maintained and developed even further. I was once told by a CEO in a large ship owner company that doing investor presentation in Oslo was so different than in most countries. Here he could start the presentation with the sales pitch and the business case. The questions and the comments he got back from the investors were extremely relevant and challenging. If you only cross the border to one of your neighbor countries, he said, you must start the presentation by Neil explaining what a ship is. And this is actually not a joke, this is serious. The second point I wanted to talk about today is the competitive access to capital and the necessity of stable regulatory frameworks. The strong access to capital has been one of the drivers for our efficient capital markets that has benefited shipping. However, we have relied not only on local investors, but international capital. And if we set aside the governmental ownership on the Oslo Stock Exchange, more than 50% of the market cap traded on Oslo Børs is from international investors outside Norway. And if you look to the shipping sector, we have an even higher international ownership ratio. So it is crucial to have this international interest at Euronext Oslo Børs to secure the strong position we have today as a top leading ship finance hub. But international investors dislike, or I can even say hate, uncertainty and political risks. Stable regulatory frameworks that are competitive in a global context and in line with EU regulations are crucial. And when changed, because sometimes you have to change them, it must be done in a transparent way and with open processes towards the market. And this cannot be stressed enough. If amendments to frame requirements come as a surprise in the financial market, it is a huge risk that international investors start to sell a position and disappear elsewhere. And such escape or withdrawal of capital from the Norwegian market, that is sticky. The capital might never float back again to Norway. My final point today is the necessity of seizing the opportunities and work for a stronger European market. Earlier this year, the European Commission presented the Savings and Investment Union. The proposal seeks to expand access to capital markets and provide business with more diversified financial options. 4 action pillars were presented. And pillar number 3 is measures to reduce the fragmentation of financial markets within Europe. We all agree that competition is good, but fragmentation is not. Competition gives better products, better prices, and for the clients and customers, fragmentation has the opposite effect. The global competition outside Europe, especially US, consists of competitors with a more simple infrastructure than the players in Europe. We believe the only way forward is a more consolidated European capital market. The foundation of Euronext, where I come from, and our newly announced strategy build upon offering of a pan-European streamlined and super efficient infrastructure throughout the total finance value chain in the capital markets. Today, we have 7 stock exchanges, 4 CSDs doing the settlement, and a pan-European clearinghouse in our portfolio. The 7 exchanges are connected through one of the most powerful trading systems in the market, and soon our CSDs will go live with the without comparison most modern settlement system in the total industry. And due to this, we can offer the market the deepest liquidity pool in Europe, meaning that Euronext has the largest and most liquid trading market in equities on the continent. And this is important because fundraising and trading belong together as nuts and bolts. No investor will put money into an IPO if the following trading market is illiquid. Trading is highly international. 70% of daily trading at Euronext Oslo Børs come from international investors outside Norway. Hence, the Oslo market is highly dependent on a well-functioning European capital market. To maintain and strengthen our position as leading capital market in shipping, the focus must be on the local ecosystem in Oslo. But at the same time, we must not forget how important Europe is for our home market. We can like or we can dislike the European Union, but to think that we can have a strong capital market in Norway separated from the rest of Europe is highly naive. Ladies and gentlemen, even though the climate for IPOs is not peaking these days, I'm convinced that the strong position we have within ship finance in Oslo will prevail. But that does not mean that we can lean back and take the position as granted. Like an athlete that must train even harder after a gold medal, knowing that the next competition next time likely will be even tougher, the same goes for us. Shall Oslo exist as a leading center within ship finance, we must commit to unconditional cooperation throughout the local ecosystem, work closely with the government and the regulators, and not at least remember that alone we are nothing. Together with the rest of Europe, we must do what we can to reduce fragmentation in the financial sector, and not at least in the Nordic region. Together, we have the opportunity to shape a future where Europe is not just a participant, but a leader in global maritime technology and finance. So by that, thank you for your attention, and I look forward to our continued collaboration in building an even stronger and more sustainable future maritime industry here in Oslo and the world. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Øyvind. We will now continue with the conversation on the financial frameworks guiding the future of shipping. And this will all be moderated again by Julian Bray. Joining us is one of the most influential voices in maritime finance. I'm talking about Chair of Global Shipping, Logistics and Offshore at Citigroup and founding Chair of the Poseidon Principles, Mr. Michael Parker.
Thank you again, Lydia, and welcome back. And Michael, welcome to this short little discussion. Michael, you're near 5 decades, or it is 5 decades, of experience in banking, and a lot of it spent at senior levels in ship finance. You've seen booms, crashes, sustained slumps, the last 5 years of astonishing returns within much of shipping. Where does this moment sit in that perspective, and what are the implications, do you think?
I think a few years ago I would have said le plus ça change que c'est la même chose. And that, until about 5 years ago, I think was the experience of a shipping banker. There are sort of 2 things that you don't do. One is you don't invade Moscow in winter, but now you can use drones. And the other thing is you don't build too many ships. And the problem for shipping banks was actually partly their fault, but was also ship owners who wanted to order too many ships. And one of the great things about the challenges facing the industry today is it's put a cap on that urge to just invest for the sake of investing. And as we've heard earlier, there are many challenges. But I think now things are actually very different. And there are four words that have been said a number of times today, and I'll just repeat them. And this is why things are different. The first is climate change. Until COP15 in Paris, I'm not sure really the world was on board. It was when the climate scientists started sharing their models and when governments, despite what Andrew said about the consensus that's required of COP, it does serve to put climate change on the global agenda. And I think we see that now. There's one man sitting somewhere in Washington who doesn't believe in it, but we know that this year the temperature is going to be higher than it was last year. I think the second thing is data and digitalization in all its forms, and we've heard that too. And that then leads to the third, which is the IMO. We now have a regulator that is in the middle of regulating a price on emissions for global trade. Let's not just talk about shipping. Shipping is about global supply chains. It's about the consumer everywhere in the world, whether it is commodities or finished goods. And we had a regulator that possibly made two attempts, but not necessarily very successful, with ballast water treatment and IMO 2020. This time, even though some of us may have hoped for a higher price on those emissions, the framework is there. I call it crossing the Rubicon, if you like. I think that has been done, and as Lassie said, let's just assume it happens. I think the other thing is pioneers, and Andrew is one of the pioneers, and we saw his ship, which is called the Pioneer. It's also the industry coming forward, the first movers, if you like, coming forward and saying what they think and what they will do. This is an industry that has tended to hide in the shadows, not want to talk about things and just get on and make money, and there's nothing wrong with that. But its responsibility, which I think has come around through climate change, through a recognition that shipping does contribute significantly to emissions, that recognition in the main players in the industry, I think, is very important. And that is, I think, what will sort of continue to drive the progress. It's what helped give birth to the Global Maritime Forum, for example. And I think it's also, as we heard from the previous panel, it's brought forward cargo owners who, recognizing that in their scope 3 emissions, they're actually the ones who are moving the things. The ship owner doesn't do anything other than try and fill his ship, make some money, and then it goes from A to B. It's the cargo owner that is responsible for the emissions. As Lassie said, again, it comes from a factory to a distribution center somewhere. And I think that's the same with the consumer who worked out during COVID that it wasn't the white van that delivered things, it was a ship stuck in the Suez Canal that their garden furniture was stuck on. And I think that has helped put shipping actually in the forefront. One other person has done that in the White House, not necessarily for the right reasons, but I think the fact that shipping, whether it's through tariffs, whether it's through a strategic view of the need for the US to have a shipbuilding industry, shipping is now on the front pages. And that is a very good thing, even if we have to persuade people to talk about it in the right way and make the right decisions.
So back to the question, even though this may not be a violent inflection point, you see that the combination of those factors coming together to make this something of an inflection point of the way the industry is working as an entity.
I think so, but it's produced another challenge. We talked about the dark fleet. We're now in a different global political environment than we have been, where a member of the Security Council is effectively at war with, indirectly, other members of the Security Council. The dark fleet will get solved at some point. We have to be optimistic and assume that there will be peace at some point. What we then need, and maybe it's the IMO, maybe it'll be some other body, we need to bring forward regulation around the shipping industry globally so that we don't have flag states appearing from nowhere. The insurance industry doesn't have to effectively avoid issues associated with those ships. So a new challenge is being presented, but I think in the way in which the IMO and the industry is taking on decarbonisation, I think that's an issue that we can work on and help deliver solutions when the global climate is different.
You mentioned, in terms of the pioneering spirit of leaders, the formation of the Global Maritime Forum nearly a decade ago now, and you were one of the very first very vocal members of the Finance Committee who were committed to that. And it was interesting you mentioned the cargo interests. Jan Dielman, who's now chairman of the GMF, is obviously here with us. You were the architect of the Poseidon Principles, which grew out of that to be a transparency and benchmarking process for banks and other finance houses to publicly express their commitment and their alignment with the IMO targets. Is there more that the Poseidon Principles can do from here?
Absolutely, and we have plans to do that. We launched 6 years ago in New York in June 19. We have 36 members now. We plan to expand that really to include anyone in any financial institution involved in finance. There is no shortage of money out there, but a lot of that money now comes from the unregulated sector. Yeah. And so whilst regulated banks, of which obviously Citi and all our members are regulated, we need to make sure that finance being provided from outside also shares in our ambitions. Now, they may not be able to report in the same way because they don't have the same type of exposure, but one of our goals is to expand through some sort of associate membership, and we'll be making some announcement later this year. But the other thing we have done is set up a Future Principles Committee to look at those issues where we think that banks working with the industry, it's so important. This is not us telling our clients what to do. It's working with our clients to come up with areas we can collaborate on, where we can measure progress and where we can use finance to actually encourage good behavior. And clearly, recycling and scrapping is an obvious issue. Ocean biodiversity is a very important issue. And those are things which will come in due course.
Michael, thanks very much for those comments. We can pick up with a number of those points in a moment. 80 minutes has never gone so fast. I'm sure we could have spent much of the rest of the morning discussing these things. Thank you. And if you'd like to give Michael a round of applause.
Yes. We now move on to a highlight of today's program. The presentation of 2 awards that celebrate bold innovation and forward-looking solutions in the maritime industry. These awards recognize companies and vessels that are pushing the boundaries of what's possible through technology, design, and sustainability. First, we will present the Ocean Solutions Award. What a brilliant name. Which will be handed out by Global Head of Ocean Services at DNB, which is Dag Klaveness. Please welcome Dag.
On behalf of DNB and North Shipping, I am proud to present the Ocean Solutions Award for 2025. The Ocean Solutions Award is an award for the development or innovation that has had the most beneficial impact on the maritime and ocean industries. The award has a broad scope, being open to a service, design, concept, or equipment within ocean sustainability, logistics, or operations. To qualify, the entrants must participate in the North Shipping exhibition, and the service, design, concept, or equipment item must be either currently available or near commercialization. The industry is in an era of change where significant progress is being made. Ships are becoming cleaner, greener, and more efficient. New ideas are circulating and new technologies emerging. This year's pool of candidates entries was exceptionally strong, and the jury's decision has been difficult, to say the least. The jury has evaluated the candidates according to a number of specific criteria, and with each candidate being given a cumulative score. And after careful and detailed discussions, the jury has shortlisted 5 candidates for further consideration. And these candidates are Wärtsilä's onboard carbon capture and storage solution, the ZBus autonomous ship platform, Orca AI's situational awareness system, Bound for Blue's eSail wind-assisted propulsion solution, and lastly, Wärtsilä again with their ammonia-fueled power system. All of the 5 shortlisted candidates could and should be considered winners in their own right, but in the end, the jury selected one standout candidate, and one that is also featured among a trio of ships entered in the Next Generation Ship Award, and that winner is Bound for Blue's eSail wind-assisted propulsion.
It's a long way to Tipperary. You just.
I'm trying to get you over here, but
That's a
Congratulations.
Congratulations. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We now move into, let me see here. We have to check this really out here. Yes. We continue with the Next Generation Ship Award, presented by Group President and CEO of DNV, Mr. Remi Eriksen.
The Nor-Shipping Next Generation Ship Award, which celebrates innovation in design and use of technology, was first presented in 2011. This year's winner will be the 8th to receive this prestigious award. Shipping has been through turbulent times the past years, the COVID pandemic, geopolitical events that have seen disruption in the Black Sea, and vessels making detours thousands of nautical miles to avoid terrorist attacks in the Red Sea, and most recently, potential decrease in world trade caused by tariffs imposed by the US. New regulations like the IMO's CII requirements and the recently approved Net Zero framework, EU ETS and Fuel EU Maritime are leading ship owners to explore alternative fuels and new technologies for both new buildings and existing vessels. This year, we are celebrating 5 shortlisted candidates for the title of Next Generation Ship, who have all demonstrated a pioneering attitude. Every year, the quality of the submissions continues to improve, making the task of selecting a winner increasingly challenging for the international jury members. Each nominee shortlisted was included in at least one jury member's personal shortlist. This year's nominees represent operators and shipyards from Asia and Europe, highlighting the international relevance of the Nor-Shipping Next Generation Award. The 5 nominees are Windcat's elevation series of construction SOV being built by Damen in Vietnam. Solvang, retrofit of a carbon capture and storage system on its 21,000 cubic meter ethylene carrier, Clipper Eris in Singapore. NYK's project to convert the LNG-fueled tugboat Sagikake into an ammonia-fueled craft in Japan. Some ships, new building sea shuttle pair of container feeder vessels being built in India, intended to run on hydrogen fuel cells. And number 5, BB Marine's new building hybrid electric commissioning SOV under construction in Spain. With a variety of new technologies spread over the 5 candidates, there was plenty for the jury to consider. This year's winner has a battery system that is one of the largest installed. The dual-fuel ship will be able to run on e-methanol where available, and will also feature the capability of recharging its battery package directly from turbines at offshore wind farms. And the winner of the 2025 Nor-Shipping Next Generation Award is BB Marine's electric commissioning SOV.
Congratulations. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much. We now move into a panel discussion focused at one of the most critical enablers of the maritime transition, finance. The question is no longer if the industry must change, but how it will be funded. So please welcome our panelists. CEO, Euronext Oslo Børs, Mr. Øyvind Amundsen. Øyvind? Ja, då går jag vidare. President and CEO at Skald, Mr. Ståle Hansen. Chairman Citigroup Poseidon Principles, Mr. Michael Parker. President Kongsberg Maritime, Ms. Lisa Edwardson Haugen. And the discussion will be moderated by Julian Bray, Editor-in-Chief of Tradewinds. Welcome back.
Thank you again, Lydia, and yeah, welcome to this final discussion panel, which is focusing on the question of ship finance, actually where the capital is going to come from and how that capital, the risk, is going to be managed in the coming years amid these uncertain and complex times. Now, we heard from Øyvind and we've heard a little from Michael, so I was hoping to bring in Ståle and Lisa in to kick things off. Ståle, the risk piece in ship finance is clearly very important on the banking side, but the insurance of the asset is also crucial. Now, it's very interesting to see that in the last few years, the risks of running ships in more complex trades, running into weather problems, running into needing repairs in out-of-the-way places, is adding to the cost of insurance. What are the long-term implications of this change as you see them?
Well, I think we should see this in a longer perspective. You know, the marine insurance mutuals have been around for over 150 years. We've weathered through a few storms before, and the unique setup here is that it is actually funded by all ship owners in all kinds of ship segments. So we are sort of coming together. The ship owners are actually funding their own insurance. And we see when technology changes or you have a geopolitical happening, then it immediately also impacts our industry, of course. So what we see is that we have to think a little bit long term. There will be some bumps in the road in the beginning. There will always be hiccups when it's research and development phase of new technology. But we are there to cover these claims. And I think that's the most important message from my end, that we will share this risk. So we are in a phase now where we are assessing it and we are learning as much as possible. We are teaming up with all these different industry bodies that are developing new technology. But I think one key point, which maybe haven't been mentioned too much today, is actually the people on board the ships that are operating the vessels. And I think it's crucial that they will continue having the best possible working conditions and that they learn and are being educated on the new technology. That's the most important thing for loss prevention going forward, which will also give a bit bigger return on the investments. And what we have seen over the past is that 90% of the accidents happen at sea is caused by human error. Yeah. So it's a crucial point.
It's a point well made indeed. And Lisa, looking at from another framework, from the provision of technology. Yes. Now, we've heard from several people that the energy transition is starting to happen in shipping, although it should be added that carbon emissions from shipping went up in 2024. Yeah, it's still going up. So while the technology and the fuel supply is getting there, are, you know, let's not celebrate too early. From your perspective of a technology provider, to both new ships and the retrofitting. How are you managing the offering products at a price in a package that is fits with the challenging business case that ship owners are having to put forward?
It's a good question, but let me start by addressing what has been discussed today, the pace of the decarbonization. I believe it's 4 factors actually driving the pace of the decarbonization. It's available technology. We have heard a lot about it today. It's about fuels. It's about the future propulsion. It's about energy efficiency, products and solutions, and it's about digitalization also, which is a key element. That is the one factor. The second factor is the available infrastructure. And let's be honest, there is a lot of job to be done still. The third factor is the important job done by IMO, because it needs to be costly to pollute. And I think that's why we both need to use the carrots and the sticks. And the fourth factor is access to funding, which we are here to discuss today. And I think traditionally we have been talking about loans, we have been addressing also governmental funding to subsidize. But I also believe there will be new business model coming through because of the digitalization, so perhaps we will have more performance contracts. But the most important, and I really liked it because it was addressed by Øyvind earlier today, because all of what we have been discussing is really costly. The technology that is available today is more costly than the traditional technology. So the Draghi report is pointing at something very important. We need to make the technology affordable. Then we need to couple innovation with competitiveness in order to make that work. So I think that is also key going forward.
Very interesting indeed. You mentioned Øyvind. If I could turn to you, Øyvind, your perspective from the top of the Oslo Bourse. You talked about the very interesting position that you have here in Oslo with this deep infrastructure of knowledge, both around the industry and with the investor base. But it has to be admitted, the investor base is relatively small, of course, the capital resources there. What more can you do to mobilize, help companies mobilize more capital from Norway to add greater capital and growth to the companies that want to list?
I think it's a little bit what I discussed earlier today, that I think that all of the ecosystem has to work closely together. We need to have the best products, we need to have the best knowledge, and we also need the best and stable framework here in Norway. So we actually can see that we have something unique to offer the market. And in that regard, I think it's important that the message is coming broadly out to globally to actually see how what we have actually been able to build up in Norway and just maintain to actually build the strength there. Because the investors are there, we have a very quality high ship owners, we have all the infrastructure around it, and the investors are also there. But we need to actually do whatever we can to show them that to invest in shipping, that is a volatile, it's a cyclic business, it's a good investment, and actually work closely together to do that. And of course, as I also said, we cannot do that alone in Norway, because we are, even though we're not part of EU, we are so closely connected to the rest of Europe that we have to work very hard and very close with the rest of our companions around in Europe to actually to reduce fragmentation, to work closely, have one common market to actually are competitive also outside Europe.
What more can you do to attract companies from Asia, perhaps, to list in Norway?
Well, I think we're quite good at attracting companies from Asia. For example, BW Group has what is enough, 7 companies listed with us, and we see more. But we're working closely towards the Asia market actually to educate and actually tell them about what products we have. We have an office in Singapore. We have just had one of our listing guys there for half a year, sitting there selling the listings and telling about the market. And we work closely together with all the banks and market participants also in Asia. We have DNB, we have Pareto, we have others sitting there. So it's really important that we also there stay together and actually try to educate. Because the products is here, and we have the companies, we have the capital, but it's more like to get the message out, I think, now.
It has to be said, though, while Oslo has a very strong position in the shipping and offshore markets for public companies, globally, public markets have been under pressure. The wall of private money that's been generated has been encouraging companies both to go private, be taken private, to stay private, because of the cost and the reputational risks otherwise. How can you counter that huge inertia?
Yeah, it is, and that happens, and it's not the first time, and we will not be the last time, because the market changes. That also we go public to private, when actually the private money is there, but then we see often that the change come back, that the pricing in the public market will actually become better than the private equities, what I can offer. So we all, of course, have to be there and work towards the market, but I think so shifts we have seen many, many times before, and I'm not I'm always concerned when things happen, but I believe strongly that the public market will actually come back again and actually on the benefit of the private equity until it changes around again.
Michael, could I turn to you and the sort of bank debt market and how that looks today? There have been a lot of reports about the scramble for good quality debt to be offered for the top-ranking tier 1 companies. Margins are very low. Lower than many other industrial sectors, indeed. There is also these signs that capital constraints on banks will be loosened, or at least new rules to tighten won't come in. It amounts to much the same thing. You mentioned when we were talking just now the risks that banks have run in the past by funding too much shipbuilding. With this $5.7 trillion needed in the next 25 years to decarbonize shipping. Is there a risk the Western banks are going to start lending too much, too cheaply?
I think the risks of that are low. I think what I referred to in our 8 minutes was the non-bank sector being the risk issue. I want to just pick up on a word that Claire used at the beginning, which I think is very important. It's pragmatism. Because in a way, I was just thinking that just now, 10 years ago, if you'd watched a video of this conference, people would have scratched their heads and said, what are they all talking about? And to me, that is actually how far we have come. I didn't hear the word decarbonisation, I think, till 2016. We were still worrying 10 years ago about the consequences of the global financial crisis. We were still worrying about the fact that the German banking system nearly collapsed under the weight of bad loans made by German shipping banks. More than the so-called Eurozone crisis, it was German banks lending to shipping.
More debt than the rest of the
More debt than to Ireland, Greece, and all those countries. Now, they have learned, regulators have learned something, which is keep leverage down. Now, the fact ship owners have been earning a lot of money in the last few years means that people are not borrowing. That's why you've got a flight to quality. Whenever a creditworthy ship owner appears on the scene, every shipping bank throws a term sheet at them. But you've got Basel IV coming in Europe at some point, even if the US is wavering on that. I think going back to the word pragmatism, because I think this is what is important, and this is an opportunity for me to say this. It has been said elsewhere. We need to get regulators who live on the same planet as the rest of us to recognize that investing in the right things needs incentivizing. Now, the private sector will use its investment criteria and will know that eventually something, just through technology and everything else, demand will become more easily investable. And then you have regulation. We've got to get financial regulators who are now beginning to worry about the unregulated sector to actually incentivize the regulated sector to be lending on the right things. The era of greenwashing is over. It's now about allowing capital freedom, if you like, to invest in the right things. And that's how we will accelerate the decarbonisation of shipping. What the IMO did in April just wasn't enough to stimulate enough investment to accelerate the process. Maybe they'll raise the numbers in 2030, but we need to get banking regulators to recognise the biggest opportunity for the world is investing in the decarbonised future, and they need to get the regulated banking system engaged in doing it.
Ståle, this green shift, the decarbonisation of fleet brings new technologies, brings new fuels, brings new risk. How are you managing to make sure you are not exposed to the unforeseen dangers?
Yeah, I mean, as everything else, we just have to understand the risks best way possible. And as I said, there's always hiccups in the beginning, but over time we strongly believe that this makes a lot of sense also from a financial perspective for insurers, because you won't have bunker spills anymore. You will have hopefully technology that will reduce the human errors at sea. So what we are doing now is to collect a lot of data from different sources. We are using AI to actually assess what are the new risks arising or on the horizon with the new technology, with the new fuel types, and then try to price that best way possible. But I strongly believe that there will be, incentivized also from insurers to go green in the future. So,
Lisa, sorry.
Yeah.
Lisa, you mentioned just now the interesting concept of service contracts and performance contracts and leasing. Now, traditionally, shipping has been very much you pay your money up front and you receive your goods and that's it. The guarantee on a ship is effectively not much more than a year. I think my washing machine had a longer guarantee, frankly, than the latest VLCC. Service contracts in other parts of business, the defence sector, for instance, which is it's part of the infrastructure there, which Kongsberg's also involved in very heavily. How does that experience of running those sorts of business relationships help develop what you're offering into the maritime sector?
I think in the future, given that we are talking so much about digitalization, all the products on board are now equipped with the sensors. It gives us a lot of data. So how can we utilize that data actually to make new kind of contracting models? I think that's a very interesting territory to explore more. And it could be a part of the funding base. Instead of having the upfront cost, you can have it over the lifetime of the vessel. Because let's be honest, when you are purchasing a new vessel, you are looking of course, at the technology risk, especially now when we're in the middle of such a major transition within the maritime industry. You need to handle that, and you need to think about that the vessel that you are now purchasing could have a lifetime of 30 years. So how make it relevant throughout that lifetime? So then looking at these kind of performance contracts, looking into if there are some way that we can serve that vessel, have frequently upgrades to it throughout the lifetime will be very interesting to see how that develops. It's things that we are looking into, but we are in the beginning.
Well, even Kongsberg, of course, is a very big public company involved in technology. The last 5 years, 7 years, 10 years even, there's been a huge upgrowth in a number of smaller tech companies, both physical tech in shipping and digital tech now. Some of them have been listed on junior markets elsewhere. What can the Oslo Bourse offer those small startups or growing startups to fuel their future growth?
Now, what we can offer is, first of all, that we have a junior market where the actual access and requirements is not as extensive as on the main board. So you have actually a place where you have reporting requirements, so we know that investors get security, but still not too extensive for the smaller companies, so that's doable for them. And then I can come there and actually meet the market participants there. We have the same electronic trading system as we have on the main board, so I have more or less actually the fees that we actually have on the main market, and then I can grow there slowly, and actually we can help them actually to get more visibility. They can do the funding and grow the business, and when they are actually big enough, they can easily and for a cheap price actually move up to the main board.
Michael, the last panel mentioned nuclear as a fuel, as a propulsion earlier. You have some views on the potential of nuclear.
Well, I think they said we couldn't fly, and more recently a Norwegian ship owner and a Greek ship owner kept the German economy from collapsing when 4 FSRUs moved in to pump gas into the German grid. We have nuclear shipping, we have nuclear icebreakers, we have nuclear navies. It has to be insurable, has to be regulated. The Secretary General of the IMO has said he expects there to be nuclear shipping in future, and the IEA and the IMO are working on updating the regulation. And Bill Gates and others are working on on nuclear and floating nuclear, which rather like the FSRUs would probably be floating nuclear plants which would produce alternative fuels as well as have defense purposes. But the real demand that's come is from the tech industry, because the grid in the Western world is not powerful enough to fuel AI. And so the demand is there. If it works technically, it will happen. Once it's floating, it will end up eventually on a ship. The Chinese are doing it, so it will happen if you can regulate it and if you can insure it. And so what's important, I think, is, I mean, it's the prototypes will prove to be successful otherwise within the next 3 or 4 years. It'll be a long time before it's on a commercial ship, but the concept of floating nuclear, I think, is something, just take it from the military to the civilian. It was Admiral Rickover in the United States who killed the commercial nuclear shipbuilding industry because he didn't want to lose the expertise from the US Navy. So it will happen, but Andrew Forrest need not worry, because it won't be for all of shipping, and there'll be plenty of green ammonia for him to sell to everyone else.
Ståle, to wrap up, will it be insurable? Nuclear shipping?
In the future, maybe, but as Michael says, today it's too early. There's a lot of regulation that needs to come into place before we also can insure it. The other fuel types are already insurable and ready to go. But nuclear, it's a little bit longer stretch.
Lovely. I see bang on time, actually, to the second. We've gone through our 20 minutes. So, panel, many thanks indeed for your contributions. I'm sure the audience would like to show their appreciation.
Thank you very much. As we come to the final keynote of today's conference, we are proud to welcome a global leader whose voice has helped shape the international response to some of the most pressing challenges of our time. The 68th US Secretary of State has spent decades at the highest levels of diplomacy and public service. He played a key role in negotiating the Paris Agreement and has since dedicated himself to advancing global climate action, most recently as the United States Special Presidential Envoy for Climate. We are honored to have him with us to share his perspective on where the world is heading and how the maritime sector can be part of the solution. Please welcome Mr. John Kerry.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. You are an amazing group of hard asses, I must say, sitting here as long as you have been today. It's really a pleasure. Lydia, thank you so much for the introduction. And what a pleasure to be able to talk to all of you here. What a pleasure to be able to return to Oslo, a city I love, because I spent a number of years here. My dad was in the embassy. I lived up on Vetterkollen, and I learned the 3 most important words that a 16-year-old needs to know riding your bike around the city, etc. Jægerskade. So anyway, long story short, I also was here, privileged to talk to you 2 years ago, and a lot has happened since then, including the fact that I turned 80. And first of all, I can't believe it. But I'm now very busy running around the world convincing people that 80 is the new 55. And I want you all to be confident about that. I also want you to know that I can do all of the things I used to do when I was 55. I just don't remember what they are. So life is new. Seriously, it really is a pleasure for me to be able to be here and to share thoughts with you at such a turbulent global moment. And it's a privilege for me because Nor Shipping, all of it, has been such a responsible player. And also because Norway itself plays such a key, important role globally. I am sad personally, after being chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Secretary of State, Special Envoy to the President, to see us suddenly in a world where people are so critical and so dismissive of a global structure that we built in the wake of World War II, which is so critical to all of us, with Ukraine, with President Putin's actions and lots of other things. We dare not quickly move away from those things that have set us apart as people, as human beings, and as countries. And so there's so much I heard this morning as I listened to many of the discussions that I'm prompted to want to address a lot more, but I'm going to try and stay focused here as there is a sort of central organizing principle that has brought us all here. I first want to share with you my sense and the sense of most of the people that I've worked with these last years as we have tackled global issues requiring multilateral diplomacy. You just won't do what we need to do to address facts based on science if we cannot come together and organize ourselves. And obviously, the actions of my president, of my country, have greatly disturbed the equilibrium and upset our capacity to move with the speed and the certainty that we need to. Now, I do want to applaud the IMO for what it has been able to do, because we really can celebrate a multilateral effort within the context of the IMO. And the revised greenhouse gas strategy is really charting a new course for the sector, providing all of you with a certainty with respect to where the world is going and how things can work, and more particularly, how you can equalize the playing field with respect to your competition. And I think that's not an unimportant thing. The checkpoints that the new process put in place just in April, which now is so critical with respect to what happens in October, and we all have to work really hard to make sure that October doesn't move away from the table that has been set here. Very importantly, that table, the menu, offers now a price, several prices for carbon. And I have said for many years, the single most important thing that we could do globally with respect to trying to address the climate crisis is establish a price for carbon. So we're not going to be able to do that or see that happen in the next years, but we can rely on individual efforts such as the IMO's to establish this price per ton of carbon, which will begin to create a mechanism, a trading mechanism where the marketplace has an ability to be able to determine the choices that CEOs and companies are going to face with respect to their deployment of new technologies or of new ships and so forth. So we are now well on our way to adopting that net zero strategy, and I mean a real net zero. Andrew Forrest spoke earlier about real versus non-real, and he's absolutely correct that talking about net zero in a loose-knit context allows a lot of people to use net zero as a mechanism of avoidance, not a mechanism of joining the fight. So I'm hopeful October, as I said, is going to transition us. But that's not all that has obviously changed since I last spoke here. And I mentioned it a moment ago. In the US, we had a consequential election, which has created enormous uncertainty. And as everybody here knows, the marketplace does not react well to uncertainty. In a few short months, he has taken the international order and turned it on its ear, and unfortunately has taken an economy that was raging ahead, certainly the strongest economy in the world 3 months ago, to become an economy that is now unfortunately, I am hearing from many people around the world a question mark, if not even just a question mark because emotionally people don't want to invest in a place where they see the things happening that are happening today. So what has happened as a result of that is that there is a threat to the pace at which this transition was taking place. Now, the word pace is really important. I know a lot of people I meet think the US is not going to do anything and that it's going to move backwards in totality and move forward. Let me address that very quickly. It is the pace of the transition, not the fact of the transition, that is, in fact, threatened. And I'll be very specific about it. About 4 weeks ago, there was a headline in the Wall Street Journal. And that headline stated unequivocally, quote, "The clean energy transition is unstoppable." That's the Wall Street Journal. Why is this true? And I believe it is true. Because the energy transition is driven, if you strip away the politics on each side of it, it is driven not by one nation or a few nations' policy. It is driven, frankly, by basic economic fundamentals, which are transitioning faster and faster. And we are seeing new technologies coming online that are offering solutions that aren't just cleaner, but they're cheaper and they're faster. An example is, I mean, you look at what Germany's done with respect to the deployment of renewables, and you've deployed and others have also, but a huge industrial country is already over 50% renewable. Too many others, my own country included, are laggards in that race to deploy the existing technology, which is wind and solar, that is far cheaper, beats fossil every time now, just on the normal way by which any business would measure a choice. And so the fact is that if we were to deploy renewables faster, we would actually be in a position where we would achieve the necessary 2030 reductions to keep us on that pathway to 2050, ultimately. So what I just said about these fundamentals is true in the United States as well as in the rest of the world. And I underscore it by telling you that in his first term as president, President Trump pulled out of Paris, famously, the only leader in the world to do so, the only country to do so, without a rationale that met any standard of intelligence or competence, and decided to play the political game with it. But guess what happened? The next day, I stood up with the governor of California, the governor of New York, with others, and we announced a movement called We're Still In. And over 1,000 mayors of all of the cities, including every major city in the United States, undertook their own agenda that they had already set to reduce emissions and to begin to be responsible. And so at the end of Donald Trump's first term, 75% of the new electricity that came online in the United States was renewable. 90% today. And meanwhile, 37 governors, Republican and Democrats alike, joined together, and all together they decided that they were going to continue to apply their renewable portfolio laws that had been passed in those 37 states. So Republican and Democrat alike continued to adhere to the mission that this planet needs to embrace more fully than it has today. And that's very, very telling. Today, as we stand here, Texas, which has a Republican governor and 2 Republican senators, is the largest deployer of wind power in the United States and one of the largest in the world. Texas, the home of oil and gas, Houston, and so forth. So I want to emphasize as strongly as I can, the presidency of the United States has changed, but the economic logic behind the transition has not. And that's not the only thing that hasn't changed. The science hasn't changed. The science, as we all know, is coming at us like a freight train out of control. It's a stunning array of events, all of which are explainable, almost 100%, not exclusively. There's still some things we don't completely understand in the relationship of weather to every aspect of climate, but we do understand the basics. And we are in a situation where we know that with the numbers of storms, the intensity of those storms, the intensity of the winds, the tornadoes, the floods, the fires, the mudslides, added up around the world, and we're seeing just an extraordinary amount of damage that is being done. So the case for moving forward really couldn't be more clear. And any thoughtful CEO of any shipping company, but any company, frankly, must realize and base decisions as a matter of fiduciary responsibility and responsibility to their board, responsibility to their shareholders. They need to be making decisions that recognize that the consequences of inaction are far, far more costly than the consequences of action. So on people in economic terms, if you're talking to the people who vote for you or you want to have vote for you, you can say to them with a huge track record of evidence that supports this, that to not take the actions that we are proposing, which actually will stimulate economies, create jobs, make a healthier world for people, reduce some of the pollution that currently kills over 7 million people a year around the planet because of bad air quality, that's all the result of pollution. That's what greenhouse gas is, pollution. And not so long ago, we used to say polluter pays. Something has happened to the fundamentals that helped us in the 1970. When I returned from the war in Vietnam, the first thing I did was join up with Earth Day. And we did Earth Day, and we brought 21 million Americans out of their homes, and we taught people, and we created a political movement out of it, and we targeted the 12 worst votes in the United States Congress and labeled them the dirty dozen, and we went after them, and we defeated 7 of the 12. You know what happened? All of a sudden, the president didn't care anything about the environment. Richard Nixon turned around and said, whoa, this is a voting issue. And we passed Clean Air Act, Safe Drinking Water, Marine Mammal Protection, Coastal Zone Management, Endangered Species, and we created the Environmental Protection Agency of the United States of America. That's what happens when you mobilize people to actually take part in their own democracy and try to build the future. So, science understands the linkage between the warming of the ocean and what we are seeing happening on this planet. It was 101 degrees Fahrenheit in the ocean off the coast of Florida last year. It was over 140 some degrees centigrade in parts of Africa and Bangladesh and places. That, as Andrew Forrest, my good friend and who's been a terrific advocate in all of this effort, said to you this morning, the humidity levels will change this equation because the human body is not equipped to be able to deal with that, with the condition that comes with the heat stress that follows from, wet bulb global temperature problems. We all have to stop and think about this. We already had major episodes of loss of life in various parts of the planet because of Mother Nature and heat, and it is going to get worse if we don't turn around this rate of emissions. Simple. Not here to talk about climate, I'm here to talk about shipping and the interrelationship between the choices you face and good business. But in 2024, we breached the climate threshold of 1.5 degrees, and for the first time on record, the science now tells us that January was the hottest January in human history. I don't know how many of you are tired of it, but I'm tired of reading about this record-breaking every single year. You can go back 30 years, and 30 years ago, that decade was the third hottest decade in history, and then the next one was the second, and the next one was the first, and now we have a January that's the hottest since all of those. Come on, folks. At some point, common sense has to begin to grab us, and we need to wrestle with this question, which is not a small one, of what is it about human nature that now makes people in broad swaths across the planet incapable of processing facts and data and truth and acting on it. And we've seen billions of dollars spent by powerful interests that want to prevent people from making the very choices that you're here making and setting an example by. Now, 2 years ago, I spoke about innovative ships that are going to be driven by new sources of power. And now we're learning, because people are moving. I understand that a little while ago with Wärtsilä and Höegh Evi, there was a discussion about a hydrogen cracker that can completely change the face of the hydrogen industry, which has had the hardest time sort of coming forward. Methanol and ammonia seem to be showing their leadership capacity here for the moment, and there's real change in the face of that. But if we could have the ability to turn green ammonia into green hydrogen on site, it's a game changer. And I see all kinds of possibilities with this game changing in a broad array. So the opportunity and transition in the shipping sector is already here. It's here now. It wasn't here with the same clarity 2 and 3 and 4 years ago. And now I think with continued regulatory clarity, with innovation, and with public and private support, it seems to me we can for certain decarbonize this industry, the shipping industry, which if it were a nation, would be the 8th largest emitter in the world. So it's imperative that we make this progress. Now, your leadership and the long-term investment decisions that you've been making and prioritizing to net zero solutions are exactly what we need to see even more of if shipping is going to live up to the goals that it has set. But what's important is it can. None of those goals are out of reach. None of those goals are undoable. We also need private finance to step up more. And I encourage friends in the industry to explore innovative products that can further support ship owners as they make green decisions which reflect the long life of those assets. Now, I recently joined a private sector firm as the co-executive chair of an entity called Galvanize. I'm not here to advertise it, but I am here to say that we are based exclusively on proving, without subsidies, without concessionary funding, on the basic norms of how you do business, of what you would do in due diligence for any particular investment you intend to make. We're going to prove that, in fact, there is enormous profitability, private equity returns in some cases, but certainly better than pension fund expectations in almost all. And it's important for us to do this. So I did this because I know that we're not, no country has enough money to be able to affect this transition. We're talking about trillions needed each year for the next 30 years. Well, guess what? I can remember when we were talking about trillions and all we had was about 100 billion or 200, 300 in terms of venture capital. Now we have $2 trillion that has been, attracted to the investments of the transition, and some of them not necessarily for energy, but for venture capital purposes. And we also see a remarkable transformation starting to take hold as a result of that. For the first time ever in human history, the division between investment into clean technology, clean energy, was 2 to 1 bigger than fossil fuel, which was at 1 trillion. We also know from the IEA that they have detected a terminal decline in demand for gas and now you don't see it immediately right now because of the war in Ukraine, because of dislocation, other things. But that demand curve is going to go down, folks. And I joined this effort because as a decarbonization focused asset manager intent on proving the profitability of accelerating the energy transition, we can take one leap forward, but I also did it because without the deployment of massive amounts of private capital, we just don't get there. And that private capital needs to wake up and see what's going on. We all thought Gary Gensler at the SEC was going to come out with disclosure requirements. And would that he had, because that would have driven an awful lot of capital more responsibly where it needs to be going. But we need to face up to the reality here. So shipping has an opportunity here, folks. Norway, once again, has an opportunity to lead, to help the world embrace the full measure of possibilities of this transition. And it can set an example for the rest of the world to follow. As I travel the world and as I visit the new fast scaling energy companies that are doing groundbreaking work, I'm reminded of a critical point that your industry embodies, and that is because of the changes you're making. If somebody came up to you, and I can't believe some of the arguments we have and the debates we have to have over this, but if somebody came up to you and said, you know, we have a climate crisis, so we got to stop shipping, and we got to stop factories, and you know, we got to do away with these emissions, you'd say, well, you're crazy. You're bloody crazy. There's no way you can do that. And guess what? You're right. But the argument that we're being given by people spending those billions of dollars is that that's the choice. It's a completely false dichotomy. False. We are now reduced to fact-free politics in too many parts of the world. And democracy has a particular hard time working with fact-free decision-making. So it is really, you know, you can't, we all know common sense tells us you can't do those things. Of course, you can't just deploy wind and solar if all you have, if you're not going to have the ability to deal with what happens when the sun doesn't shine, the wind doesn't blow. We've heard those phrases 1,000 times, or 10,000. But guess what? Now, with firm energy almost on the horizon here, with China, and I'll tell you a story about it quickly before I wrap up here, in keeping with the time thing, or close to it anyway. China, 8, 9, 10 years ago, when I was serving as Secretary of State, I went over to China within 3 weeks of becoming Secretary, much to the chagrin of my staff who said, you're crazy, they haven't had time to process this, they won't do it. And we went over and I met with President Xi, and we invited him to say, look, let's have the US and China join together, come together and actually work together to show the world we could do Paris. This is before Paris. And President Xi listened carefully, had their meetings, came back and said, we're going to do it. And together we both worked on our NDCs, the first round of sort of the big NDC thing. And guess what? Lo and behold, 1 year later, President Obama and President Xi stood up in the Great Hall of the People and announced what each country was going to do to deal with this issue. And after that, the floodgates opened. And countries all over the world said, well, we're not going to let them do this alone. We got to do this. The pressure was felt. So I used to fight with the Chinese on this issue. My colleague, a fellow named Xie Zhenhua, who he and I have a real relationship, a genuine affection, dangerous thing to say about someone in another country, but that's the way we feel. And we worked for each of the COPs, the last 4 COPs, in order to achieve progress. And at the last COP, China did something they'd never done. They said, we're going to accelerate with you. And we're going to have a methane plan and reduce methane. And we're going to, so this developed. And I'll tell you what, I used to say to the Chinese in a moment of anger in our negotiations, I'd say, you know what? You guys keep building coal-fired power plants, you're going to kill the world. And if you light them up, that's what's going to happen. Well, they built them, but they're not lighting them up. They're a backstop to not having brownouts and blackouts. And in the interim period, where President Xi would not change his mind about their target that did nothing until 2060, and their peaking was going to go for weeks and months ahead, they've probably peaked today. You know why? Because China has now built and deployed more renewables than all the rest of the world put together. They're leading this charge. And at this very moment, the President of the United States has decided to make trade impossible in that area, not to mention on other things, and literally cede the field to the entity that he defines as the biggest challenge in the world. That doesn't make sense, like a lot of things that are happening right now. So my friends, you can't stop a global economy, but you also shouldn't be able to stop common sense and facts from being listened to and processed. Former President of the United States, the third president, John Adams, famously said that facts are stubborn things. And I had a colleague in the United States Senate named Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who famously said that everyone in the world is entitled to their own opinion, but they're not entitled to their own facts. So my friends, this is where we are. Like other technology revolutions before it, this revolution is driven by innovative technologies, market logic, and investment. And a recent report by Ember put it very well. Clean technologies are driven by manufacturing logic. The more you build, the cheaper it gets. In comparison, fossil economics is extraction economics. And the more you dig, the more it costs. So with the IMO framework now nearly adopted, the shipping industry is on the precipice of cost declines, of turbocharging a journey that will end with clean fuels outperforming fossil and with clean ships no longer contributing in the way they do, with shipping, dirty ships contributing in the way they do today. So I just close by reminding you of this, my friends. In Glasgow, we undertook many promises. It was a pretty darn good multilateral event at which any one nation can stand up and say, to hell with you, we're out. And if they do, the whole thing crashes. People don't realize that. Those multilateral fora, most of them, are by consensus. And at any time, any nation that objects can walk out, and it's dead. We almost saw that happen in Paris. In the final minutes, I remember going up to the team from Nicaragua, and I had to call the First Lady of Nicaragua directly to get them to back off opposing. And then Laurent Fabius and Banque, they were able to bang the gavel, and we passed Paris. But in the last three efforts, at Sharm el-Sheikh, Glasgow, Sharm el-Sheikh, and ultimately Dubai, we came together around this proposition that we really had to change the dynamic. And so if you took all the promises that were made in Glasgow, all the promises that were made in Sharm el-Sheikh, the IEA did an analysis and said, if we did all those things as promised, we would be at 1.7 degrees of warming on the planet. We would turn the corner. Then, after Sharm el-Sheikh, it was 1.8 for Glasgow, 1.7 for Sharm el-Sheikh. And then in Dubai, I think we, in baseball terminology, hit a grand slam. Because what we got was oil-producing countries, maybe 50 companies in oil production came to that COP. And everybody agreed on the following, that we must, as a planet, transition away from fossil fuel in order to achieve net zero per the science, which means 1.5 degrees, accelerating in this decade. And the only entity that has genuinely accelerated is China. others to some degree, but not quite as much as China, obviously. So that's the goal. And we don't actually need a new COP determination to tell us how we win this fight. We need people to make the decisions that are staring them in the face and to have the courage to stand up to do what common sense and science tells us. This is not something requiring a new algorithm or some new rocket formula or anything like that. This is physics, mathematics, some chemistry and some biology, but it is not ideology all by itself, and it's not politics. So my friends, we know what we have to do. Norway knows what it has to do. Norway knows what it has to do. We know we have to use this year and this time, notwithstanding a President of the United States who wants to be the only person once again to stand outside of the right side of history. We have to move forward, and I'm confident that if you all will take this mission as seriously as you have so many other things, we're going to win this fight. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
This brings us to the end of 2025 Ocean Leadership Conference. And of course, the discussions will continue after you leave this hall. Have a wonderful North Shipping Week. And I hope you will get more inspired as you meet and see your colleagues and see the exhibitions. I hope I will see you soon again. Good luck. Take care.